Chapter 792 Visitors from the West Sea. Chapter 792 Visitors from the West Sea. Wenrenjia had ambitions to unify the North Sea, and thus naturally regarded it as his private property, especially the ghostly Dragon Cave, which only opened once every 500 years. To every royal clan, the dragon's blood grass that could be gathered within it was an extremely beneficial tonic, as it could elevate the purity of their bloodline. What more the true dragons to the pity, it was something absolutely impossible to attain. This was the treasure of the North Sea, so how could they allow people from the West Sea to covet it? What is the Mo clan of the West Sea doing, coming to a distinguished gathering of the North Sea? Wenrenjia was the first to rise up. He was the number one ace of the North Sea, and in a sense, he was also the local representative. Ha 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 ha. The waters of the four seas all belong to the imperial family, so it may be a bit too overbearing for Lord Wenren to put it that way, someone called out from atop the aerial vessel, looking down from above, but did not actually come down. Hellion Roan was also irked. His grudges against the Wenren clan weren't small, but facing outsiders, he naturally set them aside first. He opened his mouth and responded, "The waters of the four seas naturally belong to the imperial family completely, however. The imperial family has divided and conferred the North Sea to our three clans to manage. There is naturally a reason for it. It is seemingly inappropriate that the Mo clan did not even deign to pay greetings and forced its way in, is it not? Hee. Is Lord Hellion pronouncing the verdict for me?" Hearty laughter wafted over from the aerial vessel, though what could be seen was only a figure gradually coming down from above. He was obviously stepping on air, yet he trod as if walking down from a flight of stairs. This person was an old man who appeared to be in his 60s. His vitality seemed to be somewhat waning, and he was no longer in his prime, yet he still stood ramrod straight. There were several dragon scales on both his cheeks, bestowing him with a strange countenance. Behind him, a dozen youngsters emerged and also descended from the aerial vessel one after another. Ling Han's eyes narrowed instantly, for he actually caught sight of Su Xiuran, Small Sword Emperor, Dong Ling'er, the outstanding figures of the five ancient clans. Mo Yuan. Xin Yutong immediately called out, a sense of dread reflecting in the depths of his eyes. Not only him, both Hellion Rong and Wenrenjia were also like that. They did not look down on this old man just because he appeared aged and his vitality was waning. Mo Yuan, the clan king from the last generation of the Mo clan. Because of the emergence of a rare gifted genius in the Mo clan 100 years ago, he relinquished the position of the king ahead of time. Otherwise, even if he was to sit on the position till he died of old age, there would not be anyone who would have dared to say anything with his qualifications. He was an antique, but his combat strength was absolutely frightening. Perhaps he might not even lose to Wenrenjia. I had no choice. These several humans came from the five sects of the middle state just a moment ago. They came out from the Dragon Shrine, bearing the personal orders from the Dragon Emperor that I bring them to ghostly Dragon Cave for a trip. I had no choice but to reluctantly undertake the task, Mo Yuan laughingly uttered by way of an explanation somewhat. Wenrenjia and the other ultimate elites all snorted, even if it was the Dragon Emperor's arrangement that these humans enter into the ghostly Dragon Cave. Should it not be that these people ought to be bringing the personal orders of the Dragon Emperor here to the North Sea to seek them, the three great royal clans of the North Sea? Why was the Mo clan from the West Sea the one bringing them over? The reason for this was certainly not as simple as the Mo clan claimed, so there inevitably had to still be something fishy. Ling Han's heart also shivered greatly. Could it be that the five great sects have already come to form an agreement with the Sea Race, after which the two powerful factions would be joining forces to stand against the Purple Moon Kingdom, and perhaps to wipe out the Great Ling dynasty as well while at it? This was not good news. The strength of the Sea Race was no less than that of the five great sects, and might even be superior. With these two strong parties joining forces, whether the Purple Moon Kingdom would be able to resist or not was still unknown, but the Great Ling dynasty would be flanked by an elite on both sides. Furthermore, it was fully dependent on their mood whether to act on the Great Ling dynasty. This was horrible. On this trip to the ghostly Dragon Cave, he had to obtain enough treasures to elevate his cultivation level. Only he himself was the most reliable assurance. Ling Han, you can really run about. Even here I am also able to chance upon you, Su Xiaoran said in a raised voice. Ling Han was astonished to stumble upon them here. Yet the 5 of them were actually even more shocked. In reality, the 5 of them had brought personal orders from important persons of the 5 sects in order to present themselves before the Dragon Emperor. Coincidentally, Mo Yuan happened to be there and volunteered for escorting them here. Of course, Mo Yuan did not do it for naught, conveniently getting a few descendants of the Mo clan to enter as well. After all, the ghostly dragon cave was the private property belonging to the North Sea, and the past Mo clan could not have had any part in it at all and could only watch on with envy. In this way, everyone was happy. But how did Ling Han get here? A smile spread across Ling Han's face as he said, I advise you all to refrain from entering, otherwise, you all might possibly lose your lives. The 5, including Su Xiaoran, all revealed a look of anger on their faces. They represented the strongest combat strength of the younger generation. Yet this person actually dared to look down on them so much it was abominable. Unable to control herself, Dong Linger taunted, You are merely dependent on a formation. Do you think we'll be unprepared this time? Ling Han uttered an "oh" in response. He managed to con them into telling something about their trump card, although he had yet to know what it was, but it should be able to match the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. As soon as the words left her mouth, Dong Linger realized that she had let the cat out of the bag. However, she was not overly concerned after all. It was inevitable that she'd need to use this trump card anyways if she were to go up against Ling Han. Where are the personal orders of the Dragon Emperor? Wenren Jia asked with cold indifference. He had naturally ignored completely the conflicts between juniors like Ling Han and Su Xiaoran's group of 5. Mo Yuan flung his hand out, and a golden scroll was instantly hurled in Wenren Jia's direction. After catching it, the latter promptly unfolded and glanced through it, and the expression on his face abruptly darkened. He then tossed the scroll over to Helian Rong, who, after looking through it, then gave it to Xin Yutong. Sure enough, it was clearly from the Dragon Emperor's hand, no doubt about that. They were to properly receive Su Xiaoran's group of 5. They were honored guests. This was a decree from the imperial family who in the 4 seas would dare not to abide by it. All 3 powerhouses were feeling dismal. The ghostly dragon cave was clearly the private property of the North Sea, so why should they let outsiders meddle in it? But the Dragon Emperor had already decreed so, and how could they dare not obey? If they did, it would be deemed an act of rebellion, and their whole North Sea would be destroyed. Xin Yutong then returned the scroll back to Mo Yuan and sneered while he said, Lord Mo really spared no effort, personally making the trip to attend to this trivial matter. Hee, seeing the looks of you 3 lords, as ferocious as wolves and tigers, supposing I hadn't personally escorted them, would they not have been swallowed whole by the lot of you already? Mo Yuan replied just as coldly. Humph, since the matter has already reached this stage, then just cut the crap, stop wasting time, and promptly enter into the ghostly dragon cave. Wenren Jia waved a hand at the juniors at the back and said, When the ghostly dragon cave is closed, it will expel the living beings in its outer circle. But if you all were to remain inside too long, or have been infected too much by the aura within, you will be assimilated by the ghostly dragon cave, regarded as part of it, and would not be repelled later. With the perilous environment of that place, you all basically would not be able to hold out till 500 years later. Yes, everyone shouted obediently. They all split up and one by one leaped into the center of that big whirlpool, which was the entrance to the ghostly dragon cave. The Wenren royal clan was the first to go, followed by the Xinyu and then the Helian royal clan. Just when Ling Han was leaping in as well, Su Xiaoran and the others all exuded killing intent. This person had to be eliminated. Chapter 793, Blood River. Chapter 793, Blood River. The ghostly dragon cave was a very unique place. It was originally formed from the body of an elite of the sea race. At that time, he had already cultivated to the peak of what was possible, genuinely highest of the highest degree, with a combat strength of 20 stars of shattering void tyrant absolute that others could only give up all hope of ever achieving. for even the immortals that descended to the lower realm could do nothing much against him back then. Although this elite had died, the power of regulation that he had established remained uncorroded in this place throughout the ages, keeping watch over this ghostly dragon cave. It could be said that as long as one's strength was not as strong as this elite from ages ago, then one had to abide by the rules here. Shattering Void Tier elites could not enter. Any that dared to would be slain. Yet though Shattering Void Tier cultivators could not enter, it did not mean that one could not draw on a Shattering Void Tier cultivator's combat strength. Any decree or forbidden tool could still be used, but ultimately this type of combat strength would not last long. Ling Han held Helian Sun Shue's hand on one side, and on the other he tugged Hun Yo along. Flop, the three of them then jumped into the center of the whirlpool. An unstoppable force pulled them underwater towards the bottom. Just when they were spiraled into a state of obscurity, all of a sudden, they resurfaced in a blood river. Wah! The people who had entered ahead earlier were all vomiting wildly by the riverbank. However, it was apparent that the numbers had greatly reduced as the number of people present was far less than 1/10 of the original total. It seemed that though there was only one entrance, everyone must have been split into batches and sent to different places. Quick, let's leave. Ling Han's expression changed instantly, and he grabbed the two females while leaping up into the air. However, he then gave a mild exclamation of surprise as it struck him that he actually could not fly in this place. Hence, he then dropped from midair once again. He exhaled a breath, leveraging on this force, then propelled himself more than 30 meters horizontally and landed on the riverbank. Helian Sun Shui was also wearing an unsightly expression. She was feeling dizzy from the spin just now, and only wanted to throw up. Hun Yo, on the contrary, appeared as if nothing had happened, and instead was clapping her hands and shouting in excitement, "Let's do it again." Ling Han looked down at his own clothes. There were traces of corrosive reaction which was caused by the corrosive river water. Although the corrosion rate was very slow, it was extremely persistent, and even if he circulated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, it could only hamper the speed of corrosion and would not be able to resolve it. In other words, if he were to soak in the river for too long, even he would also be turned into melted liquid. What was this? Ling Han gazed into the distance. The length of this river was unknown, but the river water was blood-red and gave off a faint metallic smell. Could it be that this is the blood of the alternative dragon? Helian Sun Shui spoke out after gradually catching her breath as she, too, looked upon this river. There was the emergence of a true dragon in this realm before, but absolutely not of one that cultivated to the state of true dragon in this place. This little realm did not have the environment for one possessing the bloodline of the dragon clan to complete the final leap, and at most could only achieve the level of alternative dragon. As such, if this really was an alternative dragon's blood, its value would be indescribable, precious beyond mere words. Ling Han shook his head. Even if it was an alternative dragon's blood, it has already been contaminated, filled with corrosive energy, and as time passes, I reckon even the level 10 precious metal would be eroded away. Other Shattering Void Tier possibly could not, but this alternative dragon had already achieved the combat strength of 20 stars of Shattering Void Tier. It certainly must have also cultivated the power of regulation, and with the refining of power of regulation, was there anything in this realm that could not be refined? Unless it was something not of this realm. This place is really bleak and desolate. Ling Han looked at the surroundings on both his right and left. There was only an extremely narrow space. Apart from the blood river that lay in the middle and was gushing with what looked to be blood-like water, both sides of the riverbank were merely around 300 meters in width. After that, there was nothing else, looking as if a fault had appeared in the world. Since this place was formed from an elite's body, naturally one should not have high hopes for it to be like the real world. Which way should we go? Helian Sun Shui asked. The source, Ling Han answered after pondering. They were just about to set out when they caught sight of a blade's light, flashing past a person suddenly charged towards them. The sword chi that surged forth was filled with a decidedly dense chill that rushed towards them. Ling Han, I am going to kill you. Ling Han took a glance, then very casually stretched out his hand, and using 2 fingers in an effortless motion, he held the opponent's long sword immobilized between his fingers as he responded indifferently. So it seems that Princess Kai has quite the temper. It's best not to have such a hot temper as you'll get old easily. The person who wielded the sword was precisely Xinyu Kai. She tried hard to retrieve her sword, yet discovered to her astonishment that the sword had seemingly grown roots in Ling Han's hand and would not budge no matter how hard she pulled. She was dumbstruck. What kind of a monster was this human? This sword was a level 8 spirit tool. Furthermore, it was of an extremely fine quality, enough to display the combat strength of the peak of the deity transformation tier. But in Ling Han's hand, it was powerless like an infant. Naturally, she had heard of the fight between Ling Han and Xinyu Ziyuan, but she had always thought it to be something of an exaggeration, and surmised that it must have been the strength of the formation entirely. But now that she had the chance to clash with Ling Han, she was suddenly made aware that he was indeed incomparably powerful. Ling Han gave a slight push with his hand, causing Xinyu Kai to abruptly stagger as she fell back. After that, he also released his finger's hold on her sword and remarked, "For the sake of the Xinyu royal clan, I shall not retaliate this time, but if you persist in not knowing what's good for you, I will let you know what fear is." It was not that he was afraid of the Xinyu royal clan, but rather that the clan was a faction that he could still attempt to gather to his and Hulian's side. He did not want the amicable ties between the 2 clans to be disrupted because of a haughty little princess like Xinyu Kai. Hong, dragon meat is Nyo's favorite, Nyo said threateningly from the side. There were unshed tears in Xinyu Kai's eyes. This human was too abominable. The elders of her clan had wanted to force her to marry him, and this human actually refused. Now, he was treating her so fiercely, making her feel incredibly aggrieved. What did she do wrong? She was the biggest victim. Let's go. Ling Han did not bother with Xinyu Kai. Although they were all randomly spread out after entering, the 3 great clans already accounted for 99% of the people here. Naturally, there was no lack of people from the Xinyu royal clan, and as such there was no need for him to take care of this delicate little princess. They had but taken a few steps when they noticed that Xinyu Kai actually also followed them. Ling Han halted his steps and asked, "Why are you following us?" "Who said I am following you?" Xinyu Kai countered with her head held high. "Can I take this path as well?" "Sure, please." Ling Han made a move to give way. Xinyu Kai was secretly irked, and she walked past Ling Han in big strides, seeming to have some kind of grudge against the earth as she stomped the ground with vehemence, making thumping sounds. They waited after she had walked a good distance ahead. Only then did the 3 of them start out once again. "Tisk, TSK, that was a great beauty. Why did you not accept her?" Helian Sun Shui said in a sour tone dripping with envy. Ling Han laughed heartily as he said, "Are you jealous?" "In your dreams." Helian Sun Shui, of course, denied adamantly. "Nyo is jealous." Who Nyo, not knowing how to hide her feelings, briskly pounced onto Ling Han, dangling with her arms around his neck as she declared, "Ling Han is Nyo's, no one can snatch him." Helian Sun Shui found it laughable. Nyo appeared to be only 5 to 6 years old, yet clearly gave the impression of wanting to dominate Ling Han exclusively. Such a small little girl, how could she have got such a notion? This place is the first floor of the so-called Blood Dragon Cave? Wasn't it said that there are various kinds of spirit herbs here? Why is it that I don't see anything? Ling Han peered around. The surroundings here were too simple. One could easily see everything at a glance, whether there were any spirit herbs or not. You think the spirit herbs are like vegetables that you'll find growing all over the place? Helian Sun Shui rolled her eyes at him. Ling Han nodded his head and questioned, "Aren't they?" Recalling the spirit herbs that grew in abundance everywhere in the Black Tower that Ling Han possessed, Helian Sun Shui was abruptly rendered speechless. Chapter 794, Dragon's Bloodgrass. Chapter 794, Dragon's Bloodgrass. Although spirit herbs could be cultivated inside the Black Tower, they were limited by Ling Han's individual ability. Now, aside from dragon blood tyrant ginseng, there were not many high-grade spirit herbs in it, which made Ling Han feel extremely gloomy. That was because the majority of spirit herbs were useless for him, and he could only consume them after he had extracted their essence with the Heaven Transformation Bowl. As a result, their effects were naturally not as good as after they were concocted into alchemical pills. The amazing trait of spirit herbs was that they not only could increase cultivation, but there were also other effects. For example, every single divine herb of nature had their specific spiritual effects. Thus, Ling Han was quite interested in the spirit herbs here, especially the dragon's bloodgrass. One had to understand something. Now that he had cultivated the 9 dragons' tyrant body art, if he refined the dragon's bloodgrass, it might possibly improve this cultivation technique to a dramatic extent. Hellion Sun Shui shook her head and said, "Fateful opportunities always come together with danger. If you want to just harvest spirit herbs casually, that is not possible." "That may not be," Ling Han replied. He had thought of Xinyuan Ziguang. This man's luck was a bit unnatural as treasures practically delivered themselves into his lap. Just take the Earth Overturning Seal, for example. At the time, it actually threw itself into his arms. If Ling Han had not moved fast enough, this mystical power would have become the latter's possession. The further ahead they walked, the larger this area became. However, there was not much change on either bank. Only the river was widening. It widened from about 30 to the current 300 meters width. Moreover, the tendency did not seem to be changing anytime soon. A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind, and he said, "Since this was formed by an alternative dragon, then this river of blood, could it be was actually its blood veins?" Hellion Sun Shui nodded. "Previously, we were at the end of the blood vein, which is why it was narrower. But as we near the main arteries, it would naturally become wider." "Then this is dragon blood? Too bad it has been contaminated by some inexplicable energy, so cannot be refined," Ling Han said with pity. "I've heard Father say before that there are occasionally 1 or 2 spots that have pure blood and have not been contaminated. If our luck is better, we may still be able to get some," Hellion Sun Shui said, her eyes bright. For a person like her who had inherited the dragon bloodline, being able to refine the blood of an alternative dragon would be extremely beneficial even if there were only a few drops. Ling Han nodded. The ghostly dragon cave had existed in the North Sea for who knew how many years. Although it only opened every 500 years, after so many years of experience, Hellion Rong naturally must have also gathered enough information. They journeyed for a while longer, and then saw Xinyu Kai had stopped in front as if she was waiting for them. Seeing them approach, Xinyu Kai said very proudly, "I was not waiting for you all. I had merely gotten a little tired, so I wanted to take a short rest." Ling Han did not react and passed by her directly, which made Xinyu Kai wave her sword furiously. If it was not for the fact that the power difference was too big, she really wanted to catch up to Ling Han and chop off his head. She angrily followed behind the 3 of them. Although she was very proud, she still knew that this was a very dangerous place, and sticking close to Ling Han and his group would greatly increase her chances of survival. Voila! A huge splash suddenly appeared in the river waters ahead of them. They could vaguely see a blood-red thing flash past, but could not see it clearly enough to identify it. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth and glimpsed a long shadow beneath the waters. It felt like a snake and moved very quickly. In an instant, it had swiftly left his field of vision, and Ling Han was unable to take a good look. However, Ling Han did not pursue it with his sight. Instead, he stared at the bottom of the stream and asked, "What does dragon's blood grass look like?" "It's completely red in color. Typically, it has 3 leaves, which have a dragon-shaped pattern. The older it is, the more leaves there are, and the more distinct the dragon-shaped patterns would be," Hellion Sun Shui answered after a momentary daze. Ling Han's expression became even stranger, and he asked, "Does the dragon's blood grass grow on the banks?" "Yes." Hellion Sun Shui nodded. Behind them, Xinyu Kai heard them clearly and could not help but show a disdainful expression. Was there something wrong with this human's head? He had to get to the bottom of the issue for even such a simple matter. Ling Han pointed at the stream and said, "I saw a stalk of dragon blood grass there. As you said, it has 3 leaves, and there are patterns on the leaves. What? Helian Sun Shui exclaimed in shock. How could that be? Dragon's blood grass grows on the banks. Ling Han thought for a moment, smiled, and said, You all only search for dragon's blood grass on the banks because you have never entered the stream to look. Upon further thought, Helian Sun Shui agreed. The blood river had a terrifying corrosive ability. Even those that possessed the bloodline of a true dragon like them and have developed a sturdy, tough physique could not withstand it. Without waiting too long, their skin would rot, and as time passed, even their bones would melt. Everyone naturally treated the blood river like forbidden territory. Furthermore, there were terrifying monsters in the river, so they were even more unwilling to dive in. Xin Yukai continued to pout. Her first impression of Ling Han was too bad, so she subconsciously took every word he said to be merely playing to the crowd. The dragon's blood grass grew at the riverbed? Whom was he trying to fool? This blood river was an obstruction to vision and sealed one's divine sense, so how was he able to see? Humph! Wait here. Ling Han was about to jump into the river. Be careful, Helian Sun Shui said quickly. While this blood river did not corrode quickly, the effects were lasting and could not be resisted by any kind of origin power at all. Moreover, the sea race knew that the wider the blood river was, the stronger the corrosive quality was and the more terrifying the monsters hidden in the water would be. Ling Han nodded. Then with a leap, he entered into the river of blood. Xin Yukai could not help but be dumbfounded. This human must have gone mad. Merely bragging was not enough. He actually jumped into the river. Wasn't this seeking his own death? She humphed and said, I fear he will not be able to return now that he's gone in. Helian Sun Shui flew into a rage and countered coldly, Xin Yukai. The reason why I have not said anything all the way here is not because I am afraid of you, but rather that I'm giving face to the Xinyu royal clan. But time and again, you've been unreasonable. Do you think I do not dare to make a move on you? Xin Yukai could not help but be intimidated by her aura. Only now did she realize that the other party was the most outstanding bright pearl of the young generation of the royal clans of the North Sea. Her bloodline was incomparably pure, and was a brighter existence than even herself. However, she naturally still possessed her pride, and said defiantly, Did I speak wrongly? That is the blood river, and in it flows the corrosive blood of Lord Alternative Dragon. It represents death and decay. Putting aside the fact that he is a mere deity transformation tier warrior, even if an ultimate elite of Shattering Void tier came, he would not do well, either. That only applies to others, Helian Sun Shui retorted coldly. Xin Yukai was stunned. Did her words mean that Ling Han was capable of accomplishing tasks that even Shattering Void tier elites could not do? Where did her confidence come from? Humph, this woman was really dumb. So much that she has been completely fooled silly by a damn man and could not even understand the simplest logic. Hong. It was at this moment that they saw a wave appear on the blood river, and a gigantic splash shot up into the skies. Soon afterwards, they saw Ling Han step on the waves, his hand holding the Revere life sword. The cold light of the sword blazed as he slashed downwards. Voila! A long blood-colored shadow shot out of the water's surface consequently. At first glance, it was a giant serpent, and was about 10 meters in length. But upon closer look, one would realize that this living creature actually did not have eyes, nostrils, or ears. It only had a huge, circular mouth, and when it was open, it showed an array of long, sharp fangs. Chapter 795, Plentiful Harvest. Chapter 795, Plentiful Harvest. A bloodworm. Helian Sun Shui and Xin Yukai both gasped in shock. Although neither of them had entered the ghostly dragon cave before, they had studied the data about this place for who knew how many times. Because they had at least one chance to enter this place, they naturally had to have a good idea of the situation here. Bloodworm was a special life form birthed within the blood of the alternative dragon after its death. It was given life by the alternative dragon, yet was incapable of leaving the latter, and for its whole lifetime, it would be limited by the body of the alternative dragon. But this creature was very powerful. After all, it was born from the blood river, so no matter what, it too had absorbed a little of the blood of the alternative dragon. The bloodworm opened its circular mouth full of sharp fangs and bit at Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "I allowed you some leeway in the stream, but now that we're out of the water, you still want to be a tyrant?" With a wave of his sword, they only saw blood spurt in all directions. This bloodworm was instantly split in half from head to tail. Its internal organs dropped onto the surface of the river and gave off an incredibly powerful stench. So powerful, Xian Kai could not help but gape. She had long heard of the terrible reputation of the bloodworm, but it was killed instantly with a slash from Ling Han. Did that mean that Ling Han was too strong, or that the rumors were wrong, and that the bloodworm was actually not really all that strong? Ling Han turned around and dropped onto the bank. Helian Shui walked up to him and asked, "Are you all right?" Ling Han shook his head and answered, "I'm fine. There is power of regulation in this blood river, and the strength of corrosion would be different according to individual cultivation level. You know, my physique is a whole tier superior to my cultivation level." Realization instantly dawned on Helian Shui. It was no wonder that the corrosion rate was about the same for everyone that dropped into the river's waters. That was because the majority of them were of the true dragon bloodline and had developed their physique to the toughness of precious metal of the same level. Thus, the corrosive rate they underwent was naturally about the same. But Ling Han's physique was on a higher level than his cultivation level. Thus, though he, too, would face corrosion, its rate would be far slower than the rulers of the sea race. In comparison, actually he was the real ruler. "Hey, where's the dragon's bloodgrass?" Xin Kai asked from a distance. She did not like the way Ling Han looked so proud and always felt an urge to attack him. "You are indeed very awesome to be able to kill the bloodworm, but didn't you previously say you discovered the dragon's bloodgrass? So where is it now? What business is it of yours?" Helian Shui shot her a glare, and Hu Nyo was even more ferocious. "Why don't we have a meal of dragon stew?" Ling Han paid no attention to this opinionated little princess. With a shake of his right hand, he showed it to Helian Shui, then put it away. Instantly, Helian Shui's beautiful eyes lit up. The dragon's bloodgrass. Indeed, dragon's bloodgrass also grew on the riverbed, and from the look of things now, only Ling Han was capable of getting a hold of it. And what did that mean? Uncountable amounts of dragon's bloodgrass were beckoning towards them. Putting aside the fact that there were enough to let his son build his foundations, there was enough even for Ling Han's use. In a matter like this, it was best to make great profits on the down low. There was no need to let Xin Kai know. And when she saw Ling Han could not produce the dragon's bloodgrass, Xin Kai was even more disdainful. She had confirmed that Ling Han was a con man, and Helian Shui was so dumb that she was completely fooled to the extent that she did not even doubt him. Meanwhile, Ling Han communicated with Small Tower, wanting to know if the dragon's bloodgrass could grow within the Black Tower. Upon getting an affirmative answer, he could not help but be greatly pleased. But soon, he became disappointed, because the Black Tower could only speed up the growth of the dragon's bloodgrass, yet was incapable of obtaining seeds from it. That was because this thing didn't even bear seeds, and was completely birthed from the alternative dragon. Thus, it could only be nurtured here. Since it did not bear seeds, fine. 3 leaves becoming 4, or even 5 or 6 would be great. As the effects improved, that was equivalent to having a few more stalks growing anyways. As they walked, Ling Han kept activating the Eye of Truth to find the dragon's bloodgrass on the riverbed. It was nurtured from the blood of an alternative dragon. It was literally growing unsullied out of the mud, removing the dangers of the corrosive blood, leaving behind only the effects of refining one's physique and increasing power. Where there was dragon's bloodgrass, there would be bloodworms standing guard. So, naturally, fighting was inevitable. These bloodworms were all on the level of the heaven tier. There were some that had even reached the battle prowess of 10 stars of the heaven tier. Even Ling Han would have to use the maximum of his abilities to kill them off. In 3 days, they had gathered over 100 stalks of dragon bloodgrass, which made Helian Shui incredibly excited. One had to know that even the numbers gathered by a whole clan in the past years might not reach this much. Who asked only Ling Han to be capable of going into the river, Shin Yukai was even more speechless. This human put in act time and time again, but every time, he came back empty-handed. After so many times, Hellion Sun Shui actually still trusted him. It was practically inconceivable. What happened to the aloofness of a ruler of the sea race? And the nobility? You've tossed all that away to the end of the horizon, huh? The first level of this ghostly dragon cave was incredibly huge. On the fourth day that they had arrived, multiple rivers of blood originating from various spots gathered here, forming a super-giant lake, just like a huge sea. Yet there was a small island in the center of this lake. On the island, there was a white tower-like structure. According to hearsay, this was a passageway, and one could travel down it to the second floor. After arriving here, they would have to think of some way to cross the lake. Otherwise, if they were not able to reach the small island, how could they advance to the second floor? There were already some people crossing the lake. After so many years, all three great royal clans had their strategies, and discovered that vessels made from the bones of rulers of the sea race could resist the corrosion of the blood water for a very long period of time. These bones were naturally left behind by those elites of the sea race that had already passed away. Their skulls would be buried in their ancestral shrine, but their other bones would be left behind. Not only would they be used to cross this place, the bones of shattering void tier could also absolutely be used to forge spirit tools possessing immense might. Previously, they had all been randomly sent to the ends of various veins, but now they were all gathered again. Ling Han saw Su Xiuran and the others. They were sitting on a bone raft, heading towards the island on the lake. In the process of passage, the bone raft was continuously being corroded. Upon estimation, it would probably last just long enough for them to reach the island on the lake, and then it would just about fall apart. Hellion Sun Shui also drew out a bone raft from her spatial spirit tool. Since they had ventured here, it was natural that she would not come unprepared. This bone raft was very small, and looked like it could only accommodate 5 people. However, if 3 people climbed aboard, it would be considerably spacious. Shin Yukai gave a humph, and took out a bone raft as well. For someone like her whose status was higher, she would have a bone raft of her own, unlike others who still had to cross the lake with another. She followed closely behind Ling Han's group. She was waiting with bated breath to see how Ling Han would be defeated. As Ling Han propelled the raft with oars, he kept looking at the lake bed. Suddenly, he gasped loudly and said, "We've hit the jackpot." "Another dragon's bloodgrass?" Hellion Sun Shui asked with pleasant surprise. "Not only is there dragon's bloodgrass, it's one with 4 leaves." Ling Han replied, smiling. This time, even Hellion Sun Shui could not stay calm. Even if there was only 1 extra leaf, the effects were completely different from ones with only 3 leaves. Ling Han did not immediately dive below. Instead, he looked at the lake bed and said, "However, this stalk of dragon's bloodgrass has a big guy standing guard." By the dragon's bloodgrass, there was coiled a bloodworm that was shockingly about 30 meters long. Even through the lake water, Ling Han could still sense how terrifying this great worm was. The shattering void tier, it was definitely in the shattering void tier. Otherwise, it could not possibly exude such intimidating pressure. If it's too dangerous, it would be best not to take risks, Hellion Sun Shui advised. Although spirit herbs were great, how could they be more important than life? Ling Han nodded and said, "I'll set out an array to kill it." Tong. He jumped into the water. The ice dragon earth blasting array was set out, and followed him as he dived towards the bottom of the lake. However, Ling Han immediately discovered that the corrosive property of the lake waters here was obviously much stronger. Even if he possessed a physique a whole tier superior to his cultivation level, he felt incredible pressure. His skin had already begun to corrode. Chapter 796, Ambush. Chapter 796, Ambush. Ling Han quickly circulated the indestructible heaven scroll. An ancient aura spread out slightly, immediately blocking and slowing down the corrosion. His body was still being corroded, but the rate had slowed down more than tenfold. This was very astonishing. One had to understand that there was power of regulation in the waters of this lake of blood. Furthermore, It had been left behind by an alternative dragon that had reached 20 stars of Shattering Void tier of battle prowess. Even a Shattering Void tier cultivator would not dare bathe in it for a long period of time. Just take a look at that bone raft that was being Korodetso. What if it had been made from the bones of a Shattering Void tier cultivator? It would be damaged as well, though the rate of damage was considerably slower, and it could still carry passengers across the lake. Otherwise, with no means of flight in this place, aside from a monster like Ling Han, it would be practically impossible for anyone to reach the second floor. Ling Han swam very quickly and began to get closer and closer to that stalk of dragon's bloodgrass. The giant bloodworm awoke all of a sudden due to the disturbance. It opened its round mouth, revealing a circle of sharp fangs, and exuded a terrifying ferociousness. "Why are you acting so fierce? You think I'm scared of you?" Ling Han retorted with a laugh. He stretched out a hand and pointed. Immediately, the ice dragon flew out and floated towards the bloodworm. Its dragon claws moved, appearing very majestic and mighty. This bloodworm could be called a worm king. There were a few circular golden marks on its blood-red body, and it actually had a noble, majestic air as if it was about to evolve from a worm into a dragon. However, the opponent it faced was a real dragon. The dragon and the snake engaged in a huge battle. The Bloodworm King was quite extraordinary as its battle prowess was definitely no lower than 7 stars. It actually battled the ice dragon to a stalemate, and could even be considered to be slightly gaining the upper hand. So powerful, it really deserved to be named as the Worm King. However, there were limits to the Worm King's intelligence. It did not know that the ice dragon was formed by an array. So what if it was beaten to death 100 times? It could be revived 100 times, and would still be as good as new. It merely concentrated on engaging in a fierce battle with the ice dragon as if it wanted to dominate over the latter, proving that it was the most powerful existence. Ling Han's intelligence naturally was not on the same level as the Worm King's, and he wouldn't dumbly wait for the battle's conclusion. Instead, he immediately swam towards that 4-leaf dragon's bloodgrass. He stretched out his hand and pulled it out before storing it away into the Black Tower. Then, he started to flee. There were no benefits to be earned from killing this bloodworm, as there was nothing valuable on it at all. Moreover, he was unable to kill this Worm King, so what was the point of staying here any longer? With his departure, the array technique left with him as well. The ice dragon could only move around about 4 miles thereabouts around the array technique. When the distance had exceeded this limit, the ice dragon would immediately disappear, and then reform in the array. The Bloodworm King flew into a great rage, and immediately chased after Ling Han. He actually dared to take away its treasured herb. This was intolerable. Ling Han had no wish to continue the battle at all. Only when the Bloodworm King came near did he have the ice dragon parry its attacks, whereas he would be fleeing very quickly away. That Worm King was dumb too. When the ice dragon came out, it would shoot forth to attack as well without knowing at all that this was Ling Han's delaying strategy. In a short while, Ling Han floated onto the water's surface and saw that Hellion Sun Shui had steered the bone raft onto the small island. He swam over quickly towards them. Hong! The Bloodworm King shot out of the waters, creating a terrifying wave. Pa, pa, pa. As the lake waters passed through, there was a considerable number that had their heads and faces splashed, and they all released terrible cries. This bloody water had powerful corrosive property, and though slight contact would not be deadly, it would still cause them great suffering. But when they saw such a big guy, everyone did not dare make a sound. They only knew that they had to row their rafts with their lives. Those in the distance that had not yet begun crossing the lake simply chose to stand by and watch, wanting to wait until everything was calm before descending down onto the lake. Those in the water wanted to go ashore too, but there was only a single bone raft on everyone. If they turned back now, it would be wasted. How would they cross the lake again later? In an instant, the lake's surface was in complete chaos. Everyone was rushing with all their might, and naturally cursed the source of everything, Ling Han, to the depths of hell. This guy actually drew out such a terrifying creature. Ling Han, meanwhile, got through the experience without mishap. Anyways, with the ice dragon covering for him, He soon climbed ashore with a smile and said, "Success. Let's retreat." N. Hellion Sun Shui nodded. That tower ahead was indeed built of bones. Its middle was empty, forming a tunnel that could reach the second floor. Ling Han, Hellion Sun Shui, and Hu Niu entered the tunnel with a leap without any hesitation. Losing its target all of a sudden naturally caused the Bloodworm King to be greatly enraged. It twisted and turned over in the lake like an evil dragon, making everyone complain ceaselessly. A great many were forced to slide backwards so as to temporarily avoid the flames of wrath of this Worm King. When this Worm King's rage had subsided, those few could squeeze together somehow onto a single raft so that their journey would not end here. Xin Yu Kai hurriedly leapt after them into the bone channel. She was stunned. Ling Han was really outrageously bold, dared to trifle with even the Worm King. Even though she still hated Ling Han very much, she could not deny that no other would be able to do what he did. The passage was very long. With a thought, Ling Han drew Hellion Sun Shui and Hu Niu both into the Black Tower. Even he himself entered inside. Su Xiuran's group came in here before them and had seen him as well. Moreover, this tunnel was shockingly long, and who knew when it would suddenly end? If someone laid out an ambush at the end, then the chances of them falling into the trap were extremely high. When coming into a place like this, one had to keep an extra eye out. As Ling Han had deduced, on the second level of the ghostly dragon cave, Su Xiuran and his group were waiting cautiously. The moment they passed through, they immediately realized that this was the best spot for an ambush. Although the 5 great geniuses were all qualified to fit in the ranks of rulers of the young generation on their own, and to have them join forces against someone of the same age range was practically an insult to them, Ling Han was too much of a monster. If he was given time and space to grow, he really could affect the 10,000-year-old scheme of the 5 great immortal sections. Therefore, they had to erase this unstable factor as soon as possible. They waited patiently. 1, 2, and 3. Members of the sea race passed by successively. They made no move and continued to lie in ambush. Xin Yu Kai appeared. She looked at the surroundings in surprise. It was because she was obviously one step behind Ling Han and the others, so how had she now lost track of the 3 of them? She shuffled her feet in confusion as she continued to look around her. And inside the Black Tower, Ling Han could not help but sneer and said, "Those 5 guys have indeed set up an ambush outside. Then we can take the chance to kill them off?" Hellion Sun Shui said coldly. She, too, was an unprecedented prodigy of the sea race, and had long since reached the heaven tier. If it was not for the fact that the shattering void tier was a step too difficult to take, who knew, she might have already been standing at the apex of the human race. Good, let's kill to our heart's content. Hu Niu was even more excited. This was her favorite activity. All right, let's choose and kill one, Ling Han said smilingly. Although Su Xiuran and his group were waiting to ambush them, the tables were now turned, and Ling Han's group were the ones hidden, whereas the 5 of them were out in the open. The ones waiting in ambush and the targets had instantly switched their roles. 3 against 5. Even if Ling Han and the others could take advantage of a sudden assault, Su Xiuran and his group were the rulers of the current young generation and had an advantage in numbers. In battle prowess, they were definitely not weak. So if Ling Han was greedy, it was possible that he wouldn't be able to kill even one. Therefore, they'd focus all their power and only kill one. Kill Jia Ming. Chapter 797. Eliminating Jia Ming. Chapter 797. Eliminating Jia Ming. Kill Jia Ming. Now that the decision was made, the 3 of them divided the work amongst themselves. With the strength of Su Xiuran's group, even if they managed to catch them unawares with a sneak attack, they would be able to react very quickly. And if the 5 of them joined forces, it would be difficult to kill Jia Ming. Ling Han had the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, so how could it be that the 5 of them did not have a similar trump card up their sleeves? However, summoning their trump cards would require time, and that was why the 5 of them had set up an ambush here. Yet how could they have imagined that Ling Han would have a treasure like the Black Tower that could store living beings? It in itself was as small as a mustard seed, and even they had not discovered it in the slightest. Move out. The three figures of Ling Han and the two females appeared, yet they were charging in Jia Ming's direction. What? Su Xiuran's group were all astonished. What was going on here? How had Ling Han's group appeared out of thin air? But due to this moment of surprise on their part, Ling Han's group had already rushed towards Jia Ming. Ling Han drew his sword, Hu Niu drew her claws, whereas Helian Sun Shui shot out her fist. With the condensing of dragon qi, and added with her monstrous strength due to cultivating body arts, the power behind this punch was incredibly terrifying. You all still lack the qualification to kill me. Jia Ming immediately reacted. In such a short period of time, he was also unable to summon his treasure, and could only use his bare fist to defend his front, and use both his origin power and physique to maximize the strength of his fists. Jila, Hu Niu's speed was the fastest. With a wave of her small hand, she immediately left behind a deep bloody scar on Jia Ming's body. Even if his physique was on par with level 9 precious metal, it was useless. In an instant, he was severely wounded. Then, next was Helian Sun Shui. She had similarly learnt the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, and her speed was superior to even Ling Han's. With a punch, Pu, Jia Ming was instantly throwing up blood like mad. Her ability was superior to Jia Ming's, and added with her true dragon bloodline. How terrifying would her battle prowess be? Jia Ming's figure stumbled. His physique was really very tough. Even though he had forcefully received the attacks of two powerful characters in a sneak attack, he had not died. Instead, he simultaneously used the toughness and softness of his physique to disperse a major part of the damage. However, his face was still incomparably pale. Ling Han was the last to arrive, his sword aimed directly at Jia Ming's back. Ling Han, you will not be able to kill me, Jia Ming exclaimed severely. He had dispersed the damage from the two attacks, and Su Xiuran and the others had already moved. As long as he managed to endure this attack from Ling Han, the situation would immediately become the five of them dominating Ling Han and his group of three. The tables would be instantly turned. Moreover, they had also brought with them a very terrifying killing weapon. At first, they had planned to use it against the powerful monsters inside the ghostly dragon cave, but using it to kill Ling Han would be more than adequate. He held out both arms, intending to take a hold of Ling Han's sword by force, and thus force its advance to a halt. Only someone with his physique would dare to attempt something like that. Otherwise, who would dare to use their bare fists to catch hold of the Revere life sword? There was no need to even take complete hold of it, as the sharp sword chi would be capable of slicing off all 10 fingers instantly. Ling Han's heart was clear. The long sword *********1, and merely that pure sword intent was surging. Pooh! Jia Ming had caught the sword's blade, but was completely incapable of stopping the sword from advancing. His 10 fingers, like tofu, were cut off and sent flying. The sword's tip stabbed directly into his heart. This was the purported number 1 killing sword in the world. If one was given a direct blow from it, how could he possibly be able to survive? A violent chi barraged, and Jia Ming instantly sprayed out a mouthful of blood. He stared at Ling Han blankly as if disbelieving that a strong being like himself was actually unable to block this strike from Ling Han. However, with the force of the Revere life sword, his body immediately tilted and dropped onto the ground. A prodigy of his generation, who had once left behind his name on the stone of martial arts, died just like that. He had not even had the opportunity to use any ultimate moves, great moves, or trump cards whatsoever. Ling Han stretched out his hand and with a grab, drew Jia Ming's body into the Black Tower. This person definitely had a spatial spirit tool. He did not have time to search now, but how could he possibly allow it to be wasted? At this time, Su Xiuran and the others finally reached them. Although they were all rulers of the younger generation, they had been caught off guard. It was already commendable that they managed to react in such a short time. Ling Han laughed long and loudly. With a turn of his body, he shot out another strike. The desolate Hell Sword technique unfolded. This sword technique's strength lay in its defense. In an instant, endless sword light was released, and transformed into a defense in front of himself, Helian Sun Shui, and Hu Niu. Ding, ding, ding. In an exchange of strikes, both sides were forced backwards. The first exchange of blows ended with the successful sneak attack from Ling Han's side. However, both sides had now returned to the same starting point. Su Xiaoran's group still numbered 4, and each of them could be considered the strongest powerhouse in the heaven tier. You actually killed Jia Ming, Dong Linger exclaimed severely, her beautiful eyes flickering with flames of rage. Ling Han shrugged and retorted, "You speak as if you were waiting here to welcome me. You guys played dirty first, so why can't I pay back in kind?" Meanwhile, the Son of Lightning frowned and asked, "How did you all manage to go undetected by our divine sense?" This was too inconceivable. It was fine if it was only one person, but the 3 of them all went undetected by their senses and suddenly delivered a killing move to kill Jia Ming cleanly. This stunned him completely. If they were not able to clarify this issue, then wouldn't Ling Han be able to do this another time? Serious expressions appeared on Su Xiaoran's and the other's face as well. This ability was really too scary. Ling Han smiled calmly and asked, "Why should I tell you?" The Son of Lightning gave a humph, but also knew that Ling Han would not possibly reveal such a secret. Still, this made him too uneasy, so he could not help but voice out the question. "Could it be that you have formed Sword Heart?" Su Xiaoran asked. "Just now, I had obviously used Saber Heart to influence you. If you had not formed Sword Heart, you would definitely have been affected, and that strike would not have been accurate." Ling Han laughed in spite of himself and retorted, "Maybe my sword was off course at first, and with this influence from you, it actually hit its target." Su Xiaoran sneered, his expression growing colder and colder. He was certain that Ling Han had cultivated Sword Heart. Even if he hadn't, he wasn't far from it. Otherwise, he would definitely have been affected by his Saber Heart. Internally, he was stunned. One had to know that he held the absolute saber every single day, and was at every moment comprehending the saber intent left behind by that ultimate elite. That was how he had managed to understand Saber Heart when he was only in his early 20s. The Small Sword Emperor was the same. Mid of Sword Spring was a sword used by ultimate elites of various generations of the Heaven's Sword Sect, and possessed a variety of sword intent. Ling Han definitely did not have this kind of resources, yet was able to touch Sword Heart when he was about their age, or could even possibly have already grasped Sword Heart. This was too monstrous. The Small Sword Emperor's eyes suddenly lit up, and he exclaimed, "I get it. You have a spatial divine tool in your possession." "What?" Su Xiaoran and the others exclaimed in shock simultaneously. Even in the immortal realm, this kind of divine tool was amazing as it could store living things. Only those few ultimate elites that stood at the apex of the immortal realm were capable of forging one, and every one of them were ultimate treasures. Every time they appeared, it would be a massacre. Even the 5 sects of the immortal realm did not possess this kind of treasure, yet it had now appeared in the possession of a person from the lower realm. How could that be? Indeed. However, the 3 of them were all extremely intelligent people, and immediately came to a realization previously. Ling Han had directly stored Jia Ming's body away, and the latter had a spatial spirit tool. Everyone knew that spatial spirit tools could not be stored into another spatial spirit tool, so there was only one answer. Ling Han had gotten a hold of a spatial divine tool. Instantly, the eyes of all 4 became heated as if they had caught sight of a divine herb, staring at Ling Han closely. Chapter 798, Mountain and River Axe. Chapter 798, Mountain and River Axe. Even in the immortal realm, a spatial divine tool was an incomparably shocking treasure. If they could take possession of it, they would be able to exchange it for resources that would cause them to pass out in excitement when they entered into the immortal realm in the future. They definitely had to get it. The eyes of Su Xiaoran and the others were filled with violence. Even if not for the sake of this spatial divine tool, there was still no way that they would spare Ling Han. "Let's go all out to kill this man." The 4 of them exchanged a look and nodded. How were they supposed to divide the spatial divine tool could be a question for later. They had to first kill Ling Han. Otherwise, everything would be mere unrealistic. Su Xiaoran naturally drew the absolute saber, whereas the son of lightning drew out a gigantic axe that was a few times taller than even himself, brandished in his hand. It instantly exuded a terrifying aura of violence that would cause everyone to flee easily. Internally, Ling Han could not help but become serious. The feeling that this axe gave him was definitely in no way inferior to the absolute sabers. The five great sects really had an abundance of wealth and a powerful background. The absolute saber in itself definitely was no weaker than 10 stars of the shattering void tier, and now there was an additional axe. This would be enough to allow Su Xiuran and the others to be completely fearless even against such powerful elites like Xin Yutong. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had to be able to activate these ultimate treasures in time. Otherwise, everything would be pointless. If that hadn't been the case, how could Jia Ming have died? 2 top-grade spirit tools. This was a little troublesome. The Revere Life Sword in Ling Han's grasp automatically glowed as patterns awakened one by one. This was due to having sensed the threat presented by the Absolute Saber and that axe. He smiled slightly and said, "This axe is really quite remarkable." "Of course it is remarkable," the Son of Lightning said. "This is an imitation of the mountain and river axe." Imitation? Only now was Ling Han really stunned. Such a powerful spirit tool was actually merely an imitation? Then how extraordinarily mighty would the real mountain and river axe be? Ha 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 ha, Ling Han. Don't you want to establish your own nation and split open the skies? The Son of Lightning laughed uproariously. There is no harm in telling you. Only if you use the mountain and river axe would you be able to split open the skies. Other than a pseudo-divine tool, what kind of treasured tool would be capable of moving this piece of sky? "Oh, I'd like to hear the details," Ling Han said, smiling. "Hung, the mountain and river axe is forged from the source and barrier energies of this realm. And why do you think that is so?" Su Xiuran said coldly. "The reason why we are telling you this is because you are definitely going to die." Dong Linger and the Small Sword Emperor each held a rolled-up scroll. Those should be decrees of shattering void tier elites, but if the Absolute Saber and the Mountain and River Axe were capable of crushing Ling Han, then there would be no need for them to waste the decrees in their possession. After all, they had another motive for this journey. Otherwise, how could they have possibly been given so many treasures by their seniors? One had to know that the war against the Purple Moon Empire had reached an extremely delicate stage. Removing any top-grade treasure whatsoever could possibly affect the course of the war. They were determined to get a hold of the true dragon's tooth. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "So there actually exists this kind of treasure, something that has been forged from the source and barrier energies of an entire realm. Then I would really like to take a look at the real mountain and river axe." "You will not have the chance." At this moment, the Absolute Saber and mountain and river axe had already awakened and exuded a terrifying wave of power. These 2 treasures were definitely excellent items amongst level 10 spirit tools. They would be able to kill even mid and high-level shattering void tier elites. If the Demon Birth Sword came up against them, then it would be sliced in half within a few moves. In his first confrontation with Su Xiuran, the Demon Birth Sword had already got quite a few dents, and if the battle persisted, it would definitely not be an impossibility for it to be sliced in half. And once the sword was broken in half, its martial intent would die as well. Then it would no longer be a level 10 spirit tool, but merely a level 10 weapon. The Revere Life Sword also came to life by itself and exuded a shocking killing aura. This was the number 1 killing sword in the world, and that name did not come from mere bragging. However, there was only one Revere Life Sword, whereas the opposing party had awakened 2 great killing tools. Ling Han once again deployed the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, but even so, against the battle prowess of at least 4 shattering void tier items from Su Xiuran and the others, he was still at a disadvantage. He did not retreat, because he still wanted to see how mighty the mountain and river axe could be and deduce the power of the real mountain and river axe from that. "I shall block that sword. You are in charge of attack," Su Xiuran said as he drew out the Absolute Saber against the Revere Life Sword. "All right," the Son of Lightning said, and brandishing the mountain and river axe, charged forwards as well. Ding! The Absolute Saber and the Revere Life Sword clashed against each other, creating a crisp crashing sound, followed by a brilliant luster that shot out in all directions. The light flickered in the skies, forming uncountable ripples as if it intended to shatter this whole space itself. These two were already old rivals, and each being unable to get the upper hand over the other was something predictable. It was at this moment that the Son of Lightning charged forth, brandishing his mountain and river axe. This was the real killing move. The ice dragon rushed forth, emitting a roar like thunder. Shwa, with a wave of the axe from the Son of Lightning, the ice dragon was sliced in two and instantly disappeared without a trace. In the ice dragon ground blast formation, white fog condensed and was in the midst of forming a new ice dragon. However, this needed time, even though this period of waiting time was very short. This was too terrifying. The ice dragon possessed 7 battle stars, yet was actually incapable of blocking the might of a single axe attack. This obviously was not because the Son of Lightning was really strong, but because of the might of the axe itself. The Son of Lightning broke into laughter and drew back the axe. Then he once again charged towards Ling Han. He raised the mountain and river axe high, his face filled with a cold, murderous expression. One slash would shatter your soul die. Ling Han sighed internally. Even if this mountain and river axe was merely an imitation, its might had reached 10 stars of shattering void tier at least. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for it to have slashed through the ice dragon so easily. Then, how terrifying would the real mountain and river axe be? 15 stars? Or even 20 stars? The 5 great sects really had a terrifying amount of resources. They had not revealed all their trump cards yet, most likely because Ma Duobao had also not personally moved, and they wanted to find a chance to defeat this ancient empire all in one go. The thought merely flashed through Ling Han's mind, and he promptly dismissed the idea of using an installation of power from the Black Tower. After this installation of power, it would be a piece of cake for him to dominate Sushio Ran, and the others. The prerequisite was that they did not have treasures like the Absolute Saber and the mountain and river axe in hand. But this obviously was nonsense. Then even an installation of power would be useless, as he would not be able to stand against this kind of treasured tool. I'm not going to play with you guys anymore. Ling Han smiled faintly, and stretching out both hands, he drew Hunyo, Hellion Sun Shui, and the Revere Life Sword as well as the Ice Dragon ground blast formation into the Black Tower. Naturally, he, too, ducked inside. Shio, it was as if they had never appeared. Careful. Sushio Ran and the others all wore expressions of extreme caution. This was just like before. Ling Han and his group suddenly shot out, causing Jia Ming to die in such an incredibly stupid manner. Now, they were using the same trick again, but it was still extremely dangerous. Search carefully. Since it is a spatial god tool, then it definitely has an actual form. Slash everything here cleanly and destroy every inch of ground. The 4 of them had gone berserk, and the Absolute Saber and the mountain and river axe slashed madly at the ground. Ordinary soil and rock would only be turned to nothing by such a barrage. Not even dust would be left behind. However, how could a god tool be so easily destroyed? As long as they could find it, they would immediately wrap it up with a decree of shattering void tier and bring it back to the 5 sections. There naturally would be ultimate elites that coolly pry open the god tool and drag Ling Han and his group out by force. However, what greatly disappointed them was that no matter how hard they tried, they were unable to find the presence of this kind of god tool. Chapter 799, Flower of Dead Souls. Chapter 799, Flower of Dead Souls. Oh no! All of a sudden, the small sword emperor's expression changed. Jia Ming is still in Ling Han's hands. The Flower of Dead Souls. Sushio Ran and the others exclaimed simultaneously. Only if one held the Flower of Dead Souls would he be able to protect his divine sense from harm and enter into the 4th floor. Without the Flower of Dead Souls, there is no way we can get the true Dragon's Tooth. The ultimate elites have already explicitly said that we definitely have to get the true Dragon's Tooth, and spared no expense to get a hold of the Flower of Dead Souls for that purpose. Damn it! Why was it that it was Ming who was holding the flower of dead souls? All four were grinding their teeth. If they did not manage to complete this mission, then even with their status, they would be greeted with disdain upon their return, or even be punished. One had to know that though they were young rulers of this generation, how many geniuses and rulers had appeared in the 5 great sects in these 10,000 years. Furthermore, this was only a lower realm. How many top-tier prodigies existed in the immortal realm? To be able to survive in the immortal realm as well, they had to obtain the full support and nurturing from their sects, and if their sects turned their backs on them, then they would soon be lost in the crowd in the immortal realm. The immortal realm was too big, and there were too many geniuses. With them, there would not be too many, and without them, they would not be missed either. Let's go directly to the 4th floor and stand guard there. If Ling Han wants to get a hold of the true dragon's tooth, he will definitely head there. Soon enough, they came to a realization, stored away their respective treasures, and then headed to the depths of the 2nd floor. After they had left, Ling Han and the others appeared as well. Hee, this is really a piece of blind luck. Ming actually had this kind of treasure on him? Ling Han's hand held a snow-white flower, and in the center of the flower, black fog was concentrated. However, in mere moments, the white-colored flower actually turned purple. Flower of dead souls. I never thought that there would really be an amazing flower like this. Hellion Sun Shui gasped in surprise. Oh, you've heard of it? Ling Han asked. Hellion Sun Shui nodded and replied, according to the legend, this is an amazing flower that originates from the netherworld. After consuming it, it would be as if one's spirit had descended to the depths of the netherworld, wandering between the boundary of life and death, and experienced fully the wonders of life and death. And the 4th floor of the ghostly dragon cave would launch a terrifying barrage on one's soul. No one, even if they broke through to the shattering void tier here, would be able to withstand this kind of barrage. Can the flower of dead souls resolve that? Ling Han asked. Yes. The flower of dead souls would wrap around the soul, so one would naturally not suffer this kind of barrage, Hellion Sun Shui said. Ling Han stored the flower of dead souls away with a smile, and said, then we would be much nearer to the true dragon's tooth. Hellion Sun Shui was greatly excited. Initially, she hadn't even dared to entertain the thought, but now that they had gotten a hold of the flower of dead souls, it was as if she really saw the true dragon's tooth beckoning her over. And after refining the true dragon's tooth, her son's bloodline would definitely be improved to a terrifying extent. Why had the other parts of the alternative dragon transformed into Dao and merely left behind a single tooth? That was because this Fong had broken through to divine grade and was a real true dragon's tooth one. However, those 4 would be standing guard at the entrance to the 4th floor, so it may not be so easy to enter. Hellion Sun Shui frowned again. There is a limit to the time that the ghostly dragon cave would be open, and at the end of that period, we would be either sent out or trapped here for 500 years. Although we have the Black Tower, but 500 years later, I'm afraid the people outside would be in a terrible situation, and circumstances would have changed entirely. 500 years later, either Ma Duo Bao would have managed to successfully split open the skies, or the realm pill would have been completed. However, Ling Han still had his parents and family outside, and 500 years later, they would definitely have turned to bones. This was something that he could not accept. At that time, whatever the cost, we have to charge in, Ling Han said. He had the Revere Life Sword, and in the worst-case scenario, he would use an installation of power from the Black Tower to instantly possess the strength and speed of the Shattering Void Tier. At that time, he did not believe that he was incapable of breaking through their encirclement. Niu will help you, Niu said, clapping her chest. Ling Han could not help but rub Niu's head with a smile, and said, with Niu's help, we would definitely succeed. Hee. Niu was instantly proud of herself. The 3 of them returned to their journey once more. After some thought, Ling Han said, the flower of dead souls comes from the netherworld. So could it be that it comes from hell? The 5 sects naturally could not possibly venture into hell, then where had they gotten it from? His eyes suddenly lit up and said, the 1,000 Corpse Sect. The The Thousand Corpse sect did not originate from the immortal realm, but from hell. Then after the 5 sects had made some kind of agreement with the Thousand Corpse sect, it would not be an impossible thing for them to get a hold of the Flower of Dead Souls. The depths of their cooperation have exceeded my expectations, Ling Han murmured. After walking a short distance, they saw that Xin Yukai was actually waiting ahead. When she saw them, just as I expected, expression immediately appeared on her face as she said with a smirk, "You are not able to toss me off your trail? How troublesome." Ling Han looked towards Hellion Sun Shui with a smile and said, "Can we kill her?" All right. Nyo wants to eat stewed dragon meat." Hu Nyo said, immediately drooling, which gave Xin Yukai a scare. Why was this little girl so violent, wanting to eat dragon meat at the drop of a hat? Hellion Sun Shui shook her head and said, "Forget it. She is, after all, a princess of the Xinyu clan, and we are also on the same side for now, so killing her would not be easy to justify." Only now did Xinyu Kai sigh in relief. She naturally knew that whether it was Ling Han or Hellion Xuanxue, both had the ability to kill her. However, Ling Han's next words caused her to worry again. In any case, this is the ghostly dragon cave, so even if we kill her, no one would know it was us. Hellion Sun Shui saw that Xin Yukai was shaking in spite of herself, and with a laugh, said, "That's enough. Don't keep scaring her." Ling Han finally said, "Don't keep following us anymore. Otherwise, no matter who you are, I will still kill you." Xin Yukai's stubborn nature was instantly provoked, and she raised her head high as she said, "Kill me then, but do you dare to kill me?" This was only the 2nd floor, so there were many passers-by. She did not believe that Ling Han would really dare make a move. Ignorance. Ling Han shook his head. This little princess had definitely been spoilt rotten, as she was incredibly unruly. Thankfully, the person she'd met was him. If not, she would have lost her life long ago. They continued to advance. The environment of this 2nd floor was completely different. It was completely covered in a fiery red forest. Every single tree was about 300 meters tall and stretched open a huge canopy as if they were giants. These are blood locust trees and have grown from absorbing the essence of the blood and flesh of the true dragon. And among them, some blood locust trees have even become capable of cultivation and are able to uproot themselves and walk to kill others. They are called blood locust tree men. Hellion Sun Shui warned. Before the blood locust tree men make a move, they won't look any different from the trees nearby. Thus, we have to be careful. Every time the ghostly dragon cave opens, those who die here number the most. Ling Han nodded. This was just like how they had previously ambushed Jiao Ming. Caught unawares, even the most powerful prodigies would die with a grudge. However, at the same time, the blood locust tree men were also treasures. They had developed tree heart and had condensed a sliver of the essence of the alternate dragon, so the effects were more or less similar to those of the dragon's bloodgrass, and they were items to be fought over. Faced with treasures, even if everyone knew that this was a very dangerous place, a considerable number still chose to walk under the trees to lure the blood locust tree men into attacking them so that they could turn the tables on them and snatch their treasures. Ling Han was planning to do so as well. In any case, because the 3 of them were highly skilled, they were brave. They would only have to be careful and avoid blood locust tree man king to avoid any kind of danger. Chapter 800, Blood Locust Tree Men. Chapter 800, Blood Locust Tree Men. Shua. A tree root suddenly shot out to twist around Xin Yukai. It was extremely fast, and furthermore, it had taken her by surprise. Even if Xin Yukai had been on the alert all this while, the sneak attack was still successful because this tree root was right underneath her foot and was able to twist around her foot in a mere one move. Pa! The tree root pulled upwards, and she was hung upside down. At this moment, at least more than 10 tree roots twisted forwards and tied her up like a rice dumpling. Ah! Xin Yukai could not help but exclaim in shock. Ling Han turned around and laughed in spite of himself as he said, "I dare to bet that this is a perverted tree." The method of tying up was really too artistic. The tree roots actually trussed up Xin Yukai, yet actually outlined the enchanting shapeliness of her entire body, especially her breasts, which were presented as two protruding high peaks. Hellion Sun Shui, meanwhile, wore an expression filled with displeasure. Didn't it know that what she hated the most was another showing off the size of her bountiful breasts in front of her? She asked, "Are you still not planning to save her? Why don't we just leave her here so that she won't keep following us?" Ling Han said laughingly. Shio, another tree branch shot out, aimed directly at Xinyu Kai's heart. This time, it was not to twist around her, but to shoot right through her heart and absorb her life essence. Humph! Ling Han flicked a finger, and Wang, that tree root was instantly bounced backwards. Shio, shio, shio. A consecutive 7 branches shot out, heading to *** Xinyu Kai. Have you still not learnt your lesson? Ling Han used the earth overturning seal and slapped down on those tree branches. Pa, pa, pa. Those tree branches were all broken. Upon a closer look, there was actually green-colored liquid spraying out of them as if it was blood. Ong! A bellow filled with rage was heard, and they saw a huge tree uproot itself. Colossal vines wound around each other to form 2 legs. Xinyu Kai was hanging upside down from one of the tree trunks, waving from side to side with its movements. A blood locust tree man. Help! Help! After 2 times wandering on the verge of death, Xinyu Kai finally learnt to be afraid and asked for help from Ling Han and the others in a trembling voice. Ling Han did not rush to save her and decided to let this delicate little princess experience a little suffering so that she would learn to be more obedient. He looked at this blood locust tree man with a laugh and said, "Fighting does not depend on bellowing." Hong! The blood locust tree man directly twisted its vines to form an incredibly large and thick palm, which shot to slap down on Ling Han. The swift movement whistled, but the sound had not reached them before the palm arrived, which demonstrated how fast this blow was. About 7 stars of heaven tier of battle prowess, Ling Han estimated. In this place where shattering void tier elites were unable to enter, 7 stars of heaven tier was extremely powerful. He still used earth overturning seal and shot a strike at the tree man. Pong! In this exchange of heavy blows, the tree man was instantly sent flying, and Ling Han followed closely behind. Pong, pong, pong. Another few strikes of earth overturning seal shot out, shaking this blood locust tree man to the point of falling apart. Hunyo darted out and very quickly dug out a blood-colored crystal the size of a fist from amongst the vines. She said happily, Ling Han, Nyo found the tree heart." Xinyu Kai, meanwhile, was rubbing her bottom in dismay. Although the fall did not cause her pain, these 3 people treated her like empty air, which made her feel very wronged. At the very least, she was the princess of a clan, tender and delicate, yet she was actually ignored like this. Ling Han stored the tree heart away. Now was not the time to refine it. Their time was limited, so it would be best to first find the true dragon's tooth. They did not deliberately look for the blood locust tree men and journeyed on. If they were ambushed by the blood locust tree men, then they would not be reserved either and moved directly to kill them as well as gather a tree heart. There was a really considerable number of blood locust tree men here, and they had gathered about 30 tree hearts along the way. However, these were battle rewards that they managed to get as they occasionally saw abandoned weapons and torn fabric on their way. These were remains of people who had died with grief under the blood locust trees. A day later, they heard a huge bang coming from somewhere ahead of them. From afar, they could see a huge tree was turning around, and its vines had transformed into thick arms, which were raining endless attacks downwards. "This huge tree is close to the shattering void tier, right?" Hellion Sun Shui said in shock. Even if she acted, she might not be able to dominate over this demonic tree. Ling Han nodded and answered, "Very strong. It is indeed very strong. If it was not for the fact that it's so hard to break through to the shattering void tier, it would probably really possess the battle prowess of the shattering void tier." Even he felt that it was a thorny problem. He would definitely be unable to defeat this kind of existence, unless he used the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. However, they were fearless. Even if they could not defeat this tree man, they would be able to retreat calmly. Furthermore, Ling Han still had the Ice Dragon ground blast formation up his sleeve. They went closer and saw that this tree man was currently engaged in a fierce battle with 20-plus people. The Xinyu clan, Ling Han said. He had recognized a few of them, and Pang Xian was shockingly amongst them. Although there were over 20 of them, they still appeared to be in a difficult situation facing this colossal tree man. A majority of them could only scramble away when they saw the tree man shooting out a fist. Only Pang Xian dared to take this tree man head-on, and with his turtle shell as a shield, even if he received a blow from the tree man, he would only be sent backwards and did not suffer any heavy injuries. It was very extraordinary. This kind of defensive ability was really a bit shocking. Turtle? Huh? As expected of the race with the strongest defenses, there was practically no match for it. Pang Xian was responsible for impeding the tree man, whereas the others shot out their respective attacks. However, the tree man's defense was not weak, either. When blades penetrated its body, they merely managed to slice off some wooden chips. It was very difficult to harm its roots. Furthermore, wood-aligned creatures' strength lay in their recovery ability. Soon, those wounds that had been sliced open would recover. Help them, Xinyu Kai said hurriedly. She drew her sword and charged into the battle ranks. Although she was rather tsundere on the surface, her real strength was considerably strong. She was in the deity transformation tier, yet her battle prowess had reached the heaven tier. While it was impossible for her to turn the situation around with a single move, her battle prowess was not to be overlooked, either. Princess Kai. Pang Xian and the others cried out in pleasant surprise. Ling Han did not interfere and said, there should be some life-preserving trump cards on these people, so it would not go so far that they would die here. Just right. We can finally toss off that willful little girl. She looks beautiful, and her breasts are so big. So what are you being reserved about? Helian Xuanxue said with a hump. She was still very bothered about the fact that the Xinyu clan wanted to marry Xinyu Kai off to Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly, grabbed her with a single move, and ran forward swiftly. He said, don't be so unreasonably jealous, let's go. Carry, Nyo wants to be carried too. Hunyo quickly broke into a run and chased after them. Their target was the colossal tree that stretched up to the skies that could be seen from all corners of the second floor. And if they wanted to advance to the third floor, they definitely had to reach the colossal tree and climb it to reach the third floor. The space here was a little haphazard, but that was normal. After all, it was the inside of an alternative dragon. In the past, it could not be sliced apart even when immortals descended into the lower realm. Even though it had now died of old age, it could still give form to amazing mystical powers. They had encountered some bumps on their way and slashed a great number of blood locust tree men. This caused their advance to slow down a slight bit, but they still managed to arrive underneath the great tree in about less than half a day's time. Is this really a tree? Observing it from a closer distance, one could still discover that this great tree that was as wide as a mountain actually seemed to have formed its own bones. Chapter 801, True Dragon's Bloodstone. Chapter 801, True Dragon's Bloodstone. According to the deduction of our predecessors, this is the backbone of the alternative dragon, Helian Xuanxue said. The backbone, whether for humans or demonic beasts, was the very most important bone. It was even more important than the skull. If this was the backbone of a dragon, then no wonder it was capable of connecting the heavens and the earth. The dragon's might is gone. Ling Han pressed his hand down on the colossal tree. The bone patterns were translucent white, and even though it had experienced who knew how many millennia, it was unscathed. Yet, there was no longer any little sliver of the aura of an elite circulating within. Otherwise, if such an important part like the backbone randomly released a sliver of aura, most likely any ordinary cultivator in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier would be suppressed so much that his legs would become weak. Don't be careless. Although this place does not have dragon's might, as long as you ascended to a certain level, there would be an intimidatory effect. Furthermore, the higher you go, the more terrifying this intimidation would be, Helian Xuanxue warned. As if giving a demonstration for her words, Pong, they saw a person fall down from above. He landed solidly and was directly shattered into pieces. He was a member of the sea race, but was not one of the true dragon bloodline. Instead, he was a prodigy of the willow octopus race. There was not a single bone in his entire body, and his race was known for being hardy and possessing strong recovery abilities. Yet, he had lost life here. Another person fell down, but this time, he did not die. However, at least half of all the bones in his body had still shattered, and blood poured from him like pillars. Soon enough, his blood had dyed the ground underneath him crimson. He struggled to get up, and forcefully used his origin power to condense his broken bones. He took out a few alchemical pills and swallowed them before he sat down in a cross-legged position and began to refine the medicinal effects to heal his wounds. This bone tree was really too big. Perhaps there would be people falling down from it at every instant, and they merely had not seen them due to their limited field of vision. "Do you want to enter the Black Tower?" Ling Han asked Helian Sun Shui. "Hong, are you looking down on me?" Helian Sun Shui asked with displeasure. In any case, she was the bright pearl of the North Sea, and her current battle prowess was possibly even superior to Ling Han's. Ling Han raised his hands with a smile and said, "AI, you are unable to tell good from bad. I just care about you, so I wanted to let you have the chance to take a rest." "No need." Helian Sun Shui immediately began to climb up the bone tree. Her speed was extremely fast, and in a short while, she had rushed up to more than 300 meters in height. However, very soon, her speed slowed down. "Hunyo, let's go too." Hunyo nodded crisply, and together with Ling Han, started climbing. As expected, when they had reached about 300 meters, there was a slight pressure exuding from the bone tree. Because no one could fly here, and they could only climb up the tree, they had to hold onto the branches tightly and were forced to withstand this kind of pressure at every single moment. Facing pressure of this level, Ling Han and Hunyo naturally paid it no heed. They both transformed into lightning and quickly climbed up the tree trunk as fast as if they were lightning. Helian Sun Shui was not slow either. She had not only learnt the thunderclap ninth heaven, but she herself was a super genius, and the height of her talent was in no way inferior to that of Sushio Ran and his group. Over 2 hours later, they had passed a considerable number of people on their way. Some were still okay, and merely concentrated on climbing the tree. However, there were some that actually attempted to attack Ling Han and the others. Then, Ling Han would naturally have no reservations, and moved with no mercy. He shook these people that could not control their hands down the tree, and it would be up to fate whether they lived or died. Ling Han and the others became slower and slower. By now, they had already climbed up 2/3 of the tree, and the dragon's might was becoming stronger and stronger, which caused even Ling Han and Helian Sun Shui to sweat bullets. Only Hunyo was completely nonchalant. At one moment, she would scuttle high up, and in the next, she would climb down and urge Ling Han to pick up his speed. Ling Han thought that if one was to lay an ambush at the entrance to the 3rd floor, the effects would be extraordinary, and the chances of falling for the trap was possibly more than 90%. However, this backbone was really too big, so who knew where the target would climb up from? Thus, if one wanted to lay an ambush, they would at least need a few thousand people to form a circle. Furthermore, every single one of them would have to have battle prowess at the peak of Heaven tier, or still would not be able to do anything against Ling Han. However, Hunyo was completely unaffected by the dragon's might, and with this scout, who would be able to ambush them successfully? Their speed became slower and slower, but after another 2 hours, the three of them still reached the top of the bone tree and entered into the 3rd floor of the ghostly dragon cave. The environment here was different again. All around them, they were surrounded by bare mountain rocks, but every rock was crimson in color from afar. It looked like a land of blood, but also like a burning sea of flames. Crimson was the main color tone of this place, and aside from it, there was no other color here. Dragon's bloodgrass would also grow in the cracks of the rocks here, Helian Sun Shui said. Although they had already gathered over 100, and furthermore, also had an abundant supply of tree hearts from the blood locust tree men, this kind of treasure would never be too much. Ling Han nodded. As the three of them journeyed on, they continued to search, but did not waste too much time on their way. After all, the main focus of this journey was the true dragon's tooth. This was the most valuable treasure. If they wasted too much time here, when the closing time of the ghostly dragon cave arrived, they would be thrown out. Then if they wanted to come in again, that would be something for 500 years later. Their luck was not too bad, and they had quite a considerable harvest on their way. This naturally was because Ling Han had used the Eye of Truth and could see through everything big or small clearly, which naturally contributed greatly. In this way, their speed would definitely be affected, but the ghostly dragon cave would be open for at least half a month every time. And they had only spent 5 days here by now, so no matter what, they still had about 10 days left. There's a big guy up ahead. Ling Han withdrew his gaze and rubbed his eyes. He had been using the Eye of Truth continuously these few days, which made his eyes feel slightly sore, which in turn was quite uncomfortable. Could it be the demonic ape? Hellion Sun Shui mumbled to herself. When she saw Ling Han's questioning expression, she explained, "The monsters on the 3rd floor mostly look like a kind of ape or monkey. However, according to deductions, these are possibly the fleas of the alternative dragon, and were formed after absorbing the dragon's blood." Ling Han could not help but wear a strange expression as he asked, "Such a powerful creature like the alternative dragon would still have fleas?" When it was in its prime, of course not. But in its old age, as its life waned, it might not even have been able to move a single finger. By then, it would be normal to have fleas, Hellion Sun Shui explained. The dragon race had a very long lifespan, and even in its old age, with only a single breath left, it might only really die after another 8 to 10 years. Then, it did not seem that strange to have parasites feeding off it in that period. Just like the bloodworms on the 1st floor, they probably were also bizarre mutations given life in its old age and when its life declined. The fleas absorbed the dragon's blood and actually could grow to a height of about 30 meters. "That is really quite amazing," Ling Han said, smiling. "However, this huge flea is sitting there motionless as if it is guarding some kind of treasure. Who knows, there may be yet another dragon's bloodgrass. Come, let's go and take a look." They walked on, and in a short while, they saw that there was indeed a huge red monster crouching ahead of them. It had the shape of a monkey, but had 6 limbs, so indeed, it still looked more like a flea. And underneath this flea, there was a huge blood-colored rock, which had a much deeper color than the other rocks. Hellion Sun Shui was slightly excited as she asked, "Could it be the true dragon's bloodstone?" Chapter 802, Flea King. Chapter 802, Flea King. True dragon's bloodstone was formed from the irrigation of an alternative dragon's blood essence. So a bloodstone the size of a fist was comparable to a 3-leaf dragon's bloodgrass, and such a large chunk like the one before their eyes was absolutely shocking. Thus, Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui both gasped in astonishment, having a sense of unbelievable surprise. However, this large flea was in the shattering void tier, emitting a terrifying oppressive sensation just lying there in the distance and approaching slightly closer. Ling Han's and Hellion Sun Shui's skin was about to crack. Their physiques were the level of 9th-tier rare metal, yet they couldn't even get close, serving to show the powerfulness of the great flea. Shattering void tier 10 stars, 12 stars, or even 13 stars of battle prowess. Ling Han had a feeling inside that this flea roughly reached the level of the 15-eyed Corpse King, and could compare to that great silver spider in Fire Country's ancient mineshaft. It would be useless even if he unleashed the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, as it would be instantly destroyed. What to do? The treasure was before their eyes, yet they could only stare blankly at it. "Let's go. Let's go." Hunyo pulled on Ling Han's hand and started to walk forward. She really was young, completely not knowing what fear was. Ling Han held her back and said, "We can't. The presence in front is too powerful. We can't endure it, and will explode immediately." Originally, Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation could be used to pull aggro one, but this large guy was too powerful, and annihilating the Ice Dragon and turning its head would only be the matter of an instant. "But Nyo's not afraid," Hunyo said, skipping and jumping about. The little girl's talents were unusual. She was unafraid of the coercive pressure, and even poison, fire, ice, and whatnot were ineffective against her. Previously, she even rushed through Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire's path of 5 senses blockade. But the problem was, she didn't have the Black Tower, so how would she collect such a large bloodstone? Moreover, the Black Tower was as small as a mustard seed, and couldn't be brought with Hunyo, or else she couldn't sneak closer and then have Ling Han suddenly appear to snatch the true dragon's bloodstone immediately, then hide back in. Nyo will draw it away. Hunyo volunteered. Ling Han shook his head. No, that can at least rival the 15-eyed Corpse King, being probably the most powerful being in Ghostly Dragon Cave. So that's why it's guarding over such a large true dragon's bloodstone. You can't outrun it. Don't underestimate Nyo. Hunyo was unconvinced. With her hands on her hips, she said, Nyo's speed is the fastest. Her body turned into lightning, and in a flash, she appeared far in the distance, and with another flash, she appeared at an even further place. Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui revealed shocked expressions at the same time. Such high speed. Even they felt too inferior to bear comparison. The corners of their mouths twitched. Everyone learned the thunderclap ninth heaven, but why was there that much of a difference in speed? Nyo's a genius. Hunyo returned within a flash, walking on airs. Ling Han nodded and said, Your speed really can compare to shattering void tier elites, even being that much faster. Then Nyo's going. Hunyo wasn't afraid of that Flea King at all. Ling Han thought over it again and said, After you steer clear of that large guy, we'll meet up 5,000 meters ahead from here. Okay. Hunyo answered crisply and shot out with a xiao, stopping in front of the Flea King. She said in a loud voice, Stinky guy, come catch Nyo. The Flea King simply looked at her casually and then retracted its gaze as if it were sleeping soundly, too lazy to pay attention to this ant. Hunyo was furious to dare ignore someone so cute like her. She picked up a crimson rock and covered her small body completely. She let out a loud roar, and the rock was immediately bound with lightning. Xiao, this rock shot rapidly like a cannonball towards the Flea King. Pa! Before the rock hit, the Flea King's terrifying aura shattered the rock. After reaching such a height, even a sliver of aura could shatter stars. However, the large guy was finally infuriated and couldn't help but lift its body, glaring towards Hunyo. It immediately discovered gloomily that the ant was exactly at the distance where its attack would weaken, and releasing an attack wouldn't be fatal. It was extremely lazy and immediately lay to sleep. It was just an ant anyway. It couldn't be bothered to pay attention to it. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. Hunyo threw rocks in rapid succession. The Flea King lifting its aura could shatter the rocks, but there was also the power of lightning created by the thunderclap ninth heaven in them, so even the Flea King felt its body become somewhat numb. This was far from being able to hurt it, yet it made it very, very out of sorts. Finally, after Hunyo threw over a dozen rocks, the Flea King was in a towering rage. This king doesn't unleash own might, and you really think you can act rampantly on top of this flea's head? He roared explosively, and the sound waves turned into ripples that spread towards the surroundings. Pa, 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 pa. The rocks in the surroundings were all shattered, an extremely terrifying thing. Ha 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 ha, wanna hurt Nyo? Big stinky bug, you're far from it. Hunyo made a face and immediately leapt away. The Flea King finally rose up and charged towards Hunyo. Ling Han immediately charged towards the true dragon's bloodstone, but once he moved, he discovered that the Flea King had entrenched itself here for a long time, and its shattering void tier aura was almost corporeal. He immediately felt that the air was like sabers as he moved, tearing open his skin. Ling Han, Hellion Sun Shui hurriedly held onto him. Ling Han shook his head and said, You head in the Black Tower first, I'll go alone. But Hellion Sun Shui was obviously worried. Time to breastfeed our son, you flat chest. Ling Han grabbed Hellion Sun Shui and shoved her into the Black Tower. He unleashed the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. It obviously couldn't resist against the Flea King, But to contend against the aura that the Flea King had left was not a problem. Everyone was in the shattering void tier, though there was a gap. It wasn't large to that degree. The dragon appeared, settling in the sky above Ling Han. He brought the formation forward, but immediately discovered that the formation was to no avail in negating the shattering void tier's aura. Fuck. Ling Han could only store away the formation's eyes and walk forward alone. Pa, pa, pa. His skin immediately burst with blood, and his blood vessels were also crushed under such pressure. He hurriedly operated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and under the blessing of this ancient and miraculous art, his condition instantly became a lot better. However, he still had to continue forward, and the aura in front was even more terrifying. After walking for another stretch, his bones resounded as if they were breaking. This is a good test, Ling Han said inwardly. He was most adept in turning tribulations into fortuitous encounters. Under such immense pressure, the sword heart that he was a sliver away from might be able to break out of its cocoon. Sword heart was of the shattering void tier level, and if he could cultivate out sword heart, it would be easy to resist against shattering void tier aura. He advanced resolutely step by step, with blood bursting all over his body, but his gaze became brighter and brighter as something in his body was in the process of being born. Chapter 803, Finally Comprehending Sword Heart. Chapter 803, Finally Comprehending Sword Heart. In Ling Han's previous fight with Xinyu Ziyuan's martial intent entered his body in the end, and he resisted against it for one entire month before wearing it away. This allowed him to touch a slight edge of sword heart, but this last step could take several days to cross, or several years, several tens of years, several hundreds of years, or even remain unaccomplished in his entire lifetime. The comprehension of Tao was just that mysterious. The saying, to cover 90% of one's destined distance, brought the traveler no farther than the midway point, meant that before succeeding, it was no different from treading in the same place. Now, the Flea King's aura was even more terrifying. It was at the level of the 15-eyed Corpse King, and in a head-on confrontation, the Flea King could kill Ling Han several hundred times with a single breath. But now, he was only to resist the shattering void tier presence, which was obviously a different matter. This was a contest of martial arts level. Although Ling Han's tier was much lower, he almost cultivated out sword heart, which was where his confidence came. Break out of the cocoon to become a butterfly. Come out, sword heart, Ling Han said inwardly, but it always fell short a tiny bit, driving him mad. Pooh. He was hacking out blood in his mouth. Under the shattering void tier presence's suppression, even he would be heavily injured. On the outside, which shattering void tier elite didn't intentionally curb their presence. If they unleashed it recklessly, then except for those that were also at the shattering void tier, the others would all be killed. Even heaven tier warriors couldn't endure such presence at a close range for a long time. Pa, pa, pa. The bones all over Ling Han's body shattered, and his entire person distorted under the presence's oppressiveness. Now, he was 10 meters tall, but his body was thin and fragile, looking extremely weird. He was about to die. An enlightenment flashed across Ling Han's mind as he hurriedly dissolved one drop of indestructible true fluid, and his body immediately recovered. Even the shattering void tier presence couldn't stop it. However, the good sight didn't last long. After the drop of indestructible true fluid's essence fully dissolved, his body started to break down again. How come he hadn't comprehended sword heart yet? Ling Han suddenly realized that he was rushing it. How could martial arts be comprehended by rushing? More haste, less speed to walk down the wrong path. It was no wonder under the oppressive presence of a shattering void tier elite who wouldn't be rushed. He relaxed his mind and no longer deliberately pursued sword heart, instead focusing on resisting the pressure. Pa, pa, pa. His body still had large amounts of wounds tearing open, making him look as if he'd killed thousands of people, bathing in blood and becoming a demon. Step by step, Ling Han's steps became firm. Blood was flowing and sweat was flowing, but his gaze burned brightly as an unyieldingness arose within. Even without having learned sword heart, he could still rely on himself to resist the shattering void tier presence. At worst, he would be riddled with scars, but what was it to martial artists to get hurt a little? He advanced with large strides, getting closer and closer to that true dragon's bloodstone. Finally, he touched it. Joy arose within his heart, and at this moment, he felt some sort of shackles being broken within his body, an indescribable feeling rushing to his mind, an endless sword intent surging in his mind. Sword heart. He was first taken aback before coming to realize it. When he took the last step, his spirit also completed a transformation, crossing the one last step into sword heart. He had an enlightenment. Some truths couldn't be deliberately pursued. The naturalness of truth coming naturally was in accordance with Tao. As he thought of those things, his movements weren't slow, either as he pressed his hand on the true dragon's bloodstone. Although it was ridiculously large, after cultivating out sword heart, his divine sense was like it had been remolded, becoming extremely tough. It spread open like a fish net and enveloped the true dragon's bloodstone, storing it into the Black Tower. It was done. He turned around and started to leave the place of the oppressive presence. At this moment, he no longer felt strain. With sword heart's protection, his divine sense was stable. Even the damage of shattering void tier presence was pathetically little to him. He was still injured because he had just cultivated out sword heart, not even having initial mastery, let alone sword heart illumination. After a while, he finally walked out of this area, and Diamond Body exhibited its powers as the broken bones and shattered skin instantly healed. He then took out a set of clothes from the Black Tower and changed into them, looking like he hadn't been hurt a tiny bit. Hee, hand over the true dragon's bloodstone, and I can spare your life. But at this moment, 5 youngsters walked out from behind a few crimson rocks, staring at him with a murderous look. What? He actually didn't notice them. Ling Han was startled, and couldn't help but reflect on how he'd neglected the surrounding environment on the way back when he constantly tried to fathom the wonderful uses of sword heart. Besides, there indeed was a great limit on the divine sense here, making him fail to notice the presence of the 5 people. If they were on the level of Su Xiuran and had suddenly launched a fatal attack, even he'd probably be in a flurry. He'd been careless and neglectful. In the future, he had to maintain vigilance at all times, or else it was possible to die because of some petty details so long as there was a day that you didn't reach the peak of martial arts. Seeing that Ling Han dared to ignore them, the 5 people were all greatly furious. A man in an embroidered gown shouted, "Human, I'm talking to you." Ling Han withdrew his thoughts and said indifferently, "True dragon's bloodstone is what I obtained. Why should I hand it over to you guys? Want it? Find it yourselves. I'm in quite a good mood right now. You guys had better not ruin it." Ha 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 ha. That youngster in the embroidered gown laughed loudly. How funny. A mere human dares to be impudent. Do you know who we are? Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I obviously know." Those 5 people couldn't help but look proud. Even a human knew of their fame. How impressive. However, Ling Han's next words made their faces twitch and reveal furious expressions. Because Ling Han pointed at them and said one by one, "You're a cat, you're a dog, you're a cow, you're a pig, and you're a sheep." The youngster in the embroidered gown shouted fiercely, "I am Mo Yuanming, West Sea Mo royal family's genius." "Oh, so you're called Mo Yuanming, I know, doggo." Ling Han nodded, following on smoothly. A man in purple clothing snorted and said, "Cut the crap with him. Let's kill him and seize the true dragon's bloodstone." "Yes, royal brother Jing Xinwang." The other 4 people obeyed him strictly. Although they were all well-known figures in Mo family's younger generation, none of them could compare to Mo Zhengxin. He was a super genius that only appeared once in 1,000 years or even millennia, having pure ancestral blood and being one of the 3 great kings in the North Sea. One, having the possibility to advance to the shattering void tier before 50 years old. Mo Yuanming and 3 others surrounded him, while Mo Zhengxin stood with his hands behind his back, feeling it beneath him to attack. The sea race was proud, and as they saw it, for of them joining hands to fight one human was already thinking too highly of him. After all, The presence Ling Han revealed was only in the deity transformation tier, while there was a heaven tier warrior amongst the four people. The last chance, hand over the true dragon's bloodstone, or else die. Chapter 804, Mo Family's Genius. Chapter 804, Mo Family's Genius. I can't be bothered to talk to you guys. Ling Han, however, initiated the attack, forming a seal with his right hand and releasing it towards the four people. Golden light instantly radiated all around. It was the earth overturning seal, a mystical power. That large flea could return at any time, and he didn't want to stay here any longer. After all, he cultivated out Sword Heart and could resist against Shattering Void Tier's oppressive power, but it didn't mean that he could rival Shattering Void Tier, especially a being like the Flea King. Perhaps even the Lunar King and the likes would get a headache facing it. Outrageous! Mo Yuanming and the others all snorted a mere deity transformation tier human dared to attack them. They raised their weapons one after another, hacking, slashing, smashing, and thrusting towards Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but itch to try. Sword Heart's miraculous use was to control the weapons of the world, so those who were called Sword King, Saber King, or Fist King all grasped the heart of martial arts. It was as if sitting on a throne, being able to command the world. He extended his left hand and grabbed lightly, and instantly, the weapons in Mo Yuanming's and three others' hands all let out a gentle sound and started to tremble lightly as if they were about to escape their grasp and fly towards Ling Han. Mo Yuanming and the three others were greatly shocked. What was happening? They retreated repeatedly and held tightly onto their weapons, fearing that they really would fly away. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh inwardly. He just cultivated out Sword Heart, so it wasn't strong enough yet. Otherwise, all those weapons should fly to his side with a single thought, like imperial bodyguards protecting him. This made him anticipate things even more. How awesome would it be to have great mastery in Sword Heart? And Sword Heart Illumination represented the highest tier in Sword Path, claiming to cut all things, even extinguishing inner demons. Or else how would there be illumination in its name? Sword Heart, Mo Jingxin said in a low voice, a cautious look flashing across his face. What? Sword Heart? Impossible. This human's only in the deity transformation tier. How could he have comprehended Sword Heart? Yeah, even Shattering Void tier powerhouses might not have comprehended Sword Heart. How's this human worthy of such an honor? Mo Yuanming and the three others couldn't believe it. In their perception, the heart of martial arts only belonged to the Shattering Void tier, and a very small minority of them at that. Definitely not every Shattering Void tier elite had the heart of martial arts. Mo Zhang had a stern expression as he said, "You guys remember Su Xiuran and Zhang Mo who were with us?" Obviously. Mo Yuanming and the three others all nodded. Those four were guests that the Sea Emperor had personally received, and despite them being lowly humans, they didn't dare to underestimate them at all. These two people also cultivated out Saber Heart and Sword Heart, and grasped it more deeply than this human, Mo Jingxin said. What? Mo Yuanming and the three others were shocked, covered in goosebumps. Were humans really an extremely lowly race? Those three people didn't even reach the Shattering Void tier, yet they grasped the heart of martial arts that the majority of the Shattering Void tier elites didn't possess. With that comparison, why did it feel like the sea race was the lower level? Mo Jingxin, however, sighed inwardly. The sea race had the absolute advantage in the cultivation of tiers, and with the blessing of dragon's blood, their physiques far surpassed humans. However, with regards to martial arts comprehension, humans were a notch better. In other words, their bloodline was the reason for their success, but also the reason for their failure. However, he immediately retracted the emotion within and said indifferently, "Don't care about this now. Kill this human and seize the true dragon's bloodstone." Yes. Mo Yuanming and the three others shouted and surrounded Ling Han again. Ling Han raised his left hand. He was now filled with interest in how Sword Heart operated, continually practicing, and with every passing moment, he discovered that he made progress in the comprehension of the Sword Heart. So what if he grasped Sword Heart? He's just a human after all, and only in the deity transformation tier. Mo Yuanming and the other three attacked, launching attacks toward Ling Han for the second time. Ling Han activated the Sword Heart and influenced the weapons of Mo Yuanming and the three others. It was as if the spirit tools in their hands were revolting against them, and their attacks had no accuracy at all. Mo Yuanming and the three others were shocked. Without accuracy, how could they keep fighting? If Ling Han were a shattering void tier powerhouse, then so be it, he wouldn't win anyway, but now the opponent was just at the deity transformation tier, yet was making them so helpless. Truly an embarrassing thing. They were driven mad. Ling Han didn't even dodge once and let them attack at will, but they couldn't even touch the corner of Ling Han's clothes. How could they endure this? The heart of martial arts, was it really that powerful? Ling Han soon lost interest. These four people were too weak and had limited use in helping him improve his sword heart. He probably had to fight hand-to-hand with Su Xiuran and the Small Sword Emperor, using their saber or sword heart to improve so that his own sword heart could grow rapidly. He pressed forward with his right hand. The earth-overturning seal shone with golden light, pa, 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 sending Mo Yuanming and the three others flying. Wah! Mo Yuanming and the three others hacked out blood violently, suffering heavy injuries under Ling Han's attack. Good for nothings, Mo Jingxin said coldly, disdain written all across his face. They couldn't even take care of a human in the deity transformation tier, so what were they if not good for nothings? Ling Han took a glance at him with a smile and said, "You say it like you're not a good for nothing yourself." "I'm obviously not a good for nothing," Mo Jingxin said in all seriousness. "Whether or not you're a good for nothing isn't decided by words alone." Ling Han beckoned him with his finger. "Come, let me beat you till you're convinced, letting you know that you yourself are a good for nothing as well." "Is that possible?" Mo Jingxin shook his hands, turning them into dragon claws. "You cultivated out the heart of martial arts, controlling the weapons in the world, but my weapon is my transformed body. Can you influence it?" Ling Han looked at him a few more times and said, "You seem to be quite confident in yourself." "Obviously, I'm from West Sea's Mo family's most outstanding generation, only 27 years old now, yet already at the 9th layer of the heaven tier, and only one step away from the shattering void tier," Mo Jingxin said proudly. This indeed was impressive, enough to take pride in. This one step possibly might not even be crossed in your entire life. Relying on bloodline and limited by bloodline, accomplishments are destined to be limited if you're unable to walk your own path, Ling Han said with a smile. Talk is cheap. A mere human dares to brag without shame. Mo Jingxin attacked, arriving before Ling Han in a single stride, reaching out with his right clawed hand and attacking straight at Ling Han's face. If this attack were to hit firmly, then with the dragon claw's sharpness, even Ling Han's body would be heavily injured. Ling Han reached out with his hand and grabbed at the dragon claw. "How dare you? You seek death." Mo Yuanming and the three others snorted. Dragon claws were such a supreme weapon, yet you dared try to take it head-on. You really didn't know how to write the word death. "Pa!" Ling Han grabbed the dragon claws, a faint golden light emitting from his left hand. It was the diamond body. He caught it, as steady as a great rock. How could that be? Mo Yuanming and the three others' eyes almost popped out. How could this happen? For a human to grab onto a dragon claw with his bare palm, was there still natural order? Was there still the law of the land? Fuck. Chapter 805, Fighting at Close Quarters. Chapter 805, Fighting at Close Quarters. Even Mo Jingxin was emotionally moved. He found that the opponent's hand was as hard as metal. It wouldn't break or get injured even when scratched by dragon claws. This was too frightening. However, you are just a human. Are you certain you want to have a close battle with the sea race, especially a ruler of the sea race? It was necessary to know that the strength of the human race was their comprehension of the martial arts. Setting apart and bolstering the technique and skill were considered as the way of the king, but close combat was considered to be in the domain of body cultivators. As it happened, due to the rulers of the sea race having control of dragon's blood, Each one of them were body cultivators, and their physical bodies were incomparably tough. In a close-range battle, you don't have impressive physical strength. How long would it take to launch a palm strike? In that little time, I could have launched a few hundred attacks and smashed you to bits. Imo Jingxin snorted, while his other hand grabbed onto Ling Han. This strike was fast, accurate, and merciless. In such a short distance between them, how was Ling Han able to counter it? If the distance was farther, then with just a lift of his hand, the origin power that burst out would shoot out. It would be fine even if the speed was slower. I could still move my arm faster than your attack would be able to cross that distance. But now, just as your hand was lifted up, my dragon claw has struck and is about to snap off your neck. A cruel smile formed on the corner of Imo Jingxin's lips. In this one strike, a talented genius of the human race was about to die. This made him feel extremely satisfied in his heart. Where was the thrill in killing ordinary people? The satisfaction in killing 1,000 or 10,000 of them couldn't be compared with killing one genius. However, he suddenly realized that Ling Han had extended his right hand and grabbed onto his dragon claw again. How could this be? Earlier, he went through a process of charging towards Ling Han. Notwithstanding that, Ling Han had moved back, and there was a small buffer of time, so it was understandable that he had grasped onto his hands. But now? Could it be that this human also possessed amazing physical strength? Otherwise, how could he react so quickly? Ling Han smiled lightly and said, "Initially, I still had some appreciation for your capabilities. In the future, you'd be able to provide some contribution in the event of any major disaster. However, you insist on seeking death, so I have no choice but to fulfill your wishes." "Hong, I admit that I have underestimated you, but you want to kill me? Dream on." Imo Jingxin sneered and suddenly aimed a flying kick towards Ling Han. Ling Han lifted his leg to counter the attack. Pong, pong, pong. Both their legs were unceasingly kicking at the other party because both their hands were mutually in each other's grasp. Every strike of their legs wasn't allowed to yield, and thus mutually landed solidly on the other. The sea race had an advantage in physique. The body of Imo Jingxin was comparable to level 9 precious metal, but Ling Han wasn't weak either and had also reached this level. Theoretically, the match between the two ought to be a tie. But a tie didn't mean that neither of them would be injured. On the contrary, with the impact of every kick, severe injuries were sustained. Both their legs had already become deformed in between hits. This was akin to an incomparably powerful sword capable of crushing any obstacle. If two such swords were to collide with each other, both of them would be battered or even broken apart. The case now was that both of their legs had been twisted, and the degree of distortion was a bit scary, but they still continued to launch kicks towards each other. In this fight, both pledged their all in a stretch of a single breath. If either one of them couldn't hold on, then what would be kicked wasn't the leg, but the vital part of the lower abdomen. If the dantian was smashed, then wouldn't one be crippled? Imo Jingxin felt secretly regretful. At this point, there was no chance to use any spirit tool or decree. The arms of both parties were holding onto each other. It was impossible to retrieve either. He was a descendant of the Imo clan. He had brought with him several powerful treasures. Each one was enough to kill Ling Han, but now not one of them could be used. How could he not regret it? But who asked him to bully Ling Han being human and want to have a close-range battle with him, intending to crush him in a single exchange? However, he had not expected to encounter such a formidable opponent. Ling Han laughed and said, "You regret it? Huh, why should I regret it? Do you think that your situation is better than mine?" Imo Jingxin wasn't willing to show any weakness. "It's really better than yours." Ling Han circulated the indestructible heaven scroll, and his fractured thighs immediately returned to normal. "What?" Imo Jingxin was shocked. "What the fuck is this resilience? Are you really human? Are you sure that you aren't a monster? What about now?" Ling Han again sent over a flying kick. "Ah!" Imo Jingxin suddenly screamed. Although there wasn't any increase in this kick's power, he felt he had received a hard hit upon impact. This was due to a psychological effect. He was badly hit, but Ling Han was completely healed. Such contrast naturally caused him to fall apart mentally and to feel a strong sense of frustration. As a descendant of the true dragon, he had unexpectedly lost to a human in terms of physique. Ling Han did not show any mercy and launched his kicks even more rapidly. Pong, 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 pong. Once Emojing Xin's fighting spirit began to waver, he naturally couldn't continue with the same manner of speech. Suddenly, he was being furiously kicked by Ling Han. Pong! He couldn't get a hold of Ling Han again and was sent flying by his kicks. Blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth, and a huge part of his lower abdomen had become concave. It appeared a ghastly sight. Emojing Xin scrambled up with great difficulty. Gasping, he exhaled a breath of air before calming down a little. He then drew out a rolled scroll. Shattering Void Tear Decree. You are very strong, but so what? He sneered. In front of the battle prowess of the Shattering Void Tear, you are insignificant just like an ant. Die. He suddenly opened up the decree, unleashing a powerful pressure that made the four people, including Mo Yuanming, involuntarily kneel down as their skins split and flesh ruptured. It was as if a Shattering Void Tear elite had arrived in person, but it wasn't just the imposing manner. Even if they were rulers of martial arts, their bodies nevertheless still crumbled. Ling Han gave a light smile. With a wave of his right hand, 108 daggers suddenly appeared and formed the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. Immediately, an Ice Dragon materialized, facing towards the sky, and gave a thundering roar. Go! As Ling Han held out his hand and pointed with a finger, the Ice Dragon rushed with killing intent towards Emojing Xin. The decree had just been opened when a burly man came out, exuding the powerful aura of the Shattering Void Tear. He saw the oncoming attack of the Ice Dragon and immediately went up to meet it. Pong, pong, pong. The two sides fought, and the battle prowess of the Shattering Void Tear instantly crushed all the surrounding mountain rocks to pieces. If it was not for this place being the ghostly dragon cave, the stars in the world would be out of luck again. Who knew how many will be crushed? That man was being suppressed. What? The group of five, including Emojing Xin, all had expressions of disbelief on their faces. This was their biggest trump card. In this ghostly dragon cave which Shattering Void Tear elites couldn't enter, wouldn't a Shattering Void Tear decree be amazing enough? But now? He was being completely suppressed by one side. Ling Han understood it clearly in his heart. How strong could the strength sealed in a decree be? Due to the double restriction of the maker and the materials of the decree itself, it was already very remarkable to be able to achieve battle prowess surpassing 5 stars. In the Shattering Void Tier, 1 star was the difference between heaven and earth, not to mention 2 stars or more. With a roar from the Ice Dragon, the decree was torn to pieces. No! Emojing Xin screamed, but was strangled to death by the Ice Dragon without any doubt. Ling Han was going for the kill. He just wanted to kill the group of 4, including Mo Yuanming. But he was shocked when he saw that the Flea King was flying back in a distance away with the astonishing speed of a bullet. When the big guy saw that the true dragon Bloodstone had disappeared, he would definitely flip out. He'd better retreat. Ling Han also couldn't be bothered with taking action against the 4 people, including Mo Yuanming. They were of no importance in his eyes, anyway. He leaped up, and in a flash, disappeared into the distance. Chapter 806, Barge Through. Chapter 806, Barge Through. Ling Han rushed to the place which had been agreed upon with Hunyeo. Upon arriving, he saw that the little girl had arrived long ago, and was sitting on the stone waving her legs, appearing bored, her small lips pouting in a very unhappy expression. After discovering that Ling Han had come over, she groaned, and said, Ling Han, you are too slow. You've made Nyo waited for so long. Sorry. Ling Han quickly smiled, and said, Nyo has really done me a huge favor this time. Hunyeo immediately became extremely pleased. Clapping her hands, she said, Nyo is the best. Nyo really is the best. Ling Han patted Hunyeo's head. This little girl was indeed very special. Let's take a look at the harvest first. Ling Han and Hunyeo entered the Black Tower together. He then called Hellion Sun Shui over. She was holding Ling Jianshui, and they both came together before the huge true dragon Bloodstone. Iya, Iya. Ling Jianshui wriggled his little hands and feet, trying hard to break out from within Helian Sun Shui's arms. Oh! Ling Han was stunned. Did this little guy feel the power of the true dragon Bloodstone? He paused for a while and said, Sun Shui, let go of him and we shall see. Naturally, it would be impossible to have any problems within the Black Tower. Accordingly, Helian Sun Shui put her son on the ground. The little guy immediately used both his hands and feet and charged towards the true dragon Bloodstone. Although he hadn't reached age of 1 year yet, his brute strength and speed were incomparably impressive. Very quickly, he ran to the front of the true dragon Bloodstone and climbed up on it one step at a time. When he reached the peak, he comfortably lay face down on top of its surface, just like the Flea King previously. Ling Han immediately noticed that on the little guy's body, there were flickering streaks of draconic patterns, emitting a faint radiance. There was outpouring of dragon's might. Moreover, it was consistently getting stronger. He'd absorb the true dragon's blood and keep getting stronger. For the descendants of the true dragon's blood was definitely a rare treasure, and perhaps even something irreplaceable. Ling Han walked over and put his hand on the true dragon Bloodstone. Immediately, the 9 dragons' tyrant body art automatically circulated to extract the essence of the Bloodstone, strengthening his body and enhancing his physique slightly with a substantial increase in strength. He has a sudden urge to completely draw out the energy within the Bloodstone and let his brute force instantly soar upwards into heaven tier, or even stronger. He promptly restrained himself. It wouldn't be a good thing for strength to increase too rapidly. One would need to have a strong enough mental state to control such power. Despite being of the heaven tier in his past life, his battle prowess wasn't strong at all. In the past, he might not even be a match for the current him now. He didn't have an edge in mental state. It could be said that in addition to striving forward on the familiar road towards the heaven tier, he had completely surpassed his previous life, and this time it was only within a span of just over 5 years. When he thought about this, it made him feel as though he was in a dream. After reaching the peak of the deity transformation tier, it was necessary to build a solid foundation in that state before breaking through. He couldn't leave any regret. Otherwise, it might bring about a huge impact. Ling Han retracted his hand and said, Small tower, how will this kid absorb the true dragon's blood? Will there be any problem? The small tower emerged and calmly replied, His physique is good, much stronger than yours. You'd better die soon. That way, your son will inherit the Black Tower and definitely be more outstanding than you. Fuck. The corner of Ling Han's lips twitched. Even though you were praising my son, you need not belittle me so much, right? This proud tower. One day, I will make it kneel down and proclaim its defeat. However, it's good if there's no problem. Just let this kid lie on top of the stone to absorb the true dragon's blood. I really don't know what kind of height his brute force can reach once he has activated his spirit base. Flower Blossom tier? Spiritual Infant tier? 3 people including Ling Han came out of the Black Tower. The most precious treasure was of course the true dragon's tooth. By comparison, the others were just sesame seeds. Even the true dragon Bloodstone could only be regarded as a slightly larger sesame seed. Arg! Just as they exited the Black Tower, they heard a terrible roar, which completely shook them to the point that their skin was undulating like waves. It was that Flea King. It came back, only to discover that the true dragon Bloodstone wasn't there. It naturally blew its top off, and bellowed so violently as if it wanted to destroy this part of the realm. Let's go. The 3 including Ling Han left at once. To resolutely take on this 15-eyed corpse king level Flea King was simply courting death. Only a fool would do such a thing. After running for over 100 miles, although the roars could still be heard, the ripples in the air finally could not affect them anymore. This was precisely what a shattering Void Tier elite was with just a roar. It could cause shock injury to a Heaven Tier elite. After running for several hundred miles more, the roars finally disappeared completely, and the 3 people sighed in relief. Fortunately, This big guy did not pursue them and attack everywhere. Otherwise, if they were targeted, would they be able to stand up to it even if they managed to awaken the Revere life sword? They no longer deliberately searched for other treasures, be it true dragon bloodstone or the dragon's bloodgrass. Now they were focused on the true dragon's tooth. After all, they didn't know how much time they would spend on the 4th floor. 2 days later, they came to the end of the 3rd floor. Here, there wasn't any passageway or tall mountain made of bones. There was only a seemingly ordinary portal, but it was connected to a completely different world, and the opposite side was an ocean of flames. Hee, finally I've waited until you came. Amidst the cold sneer, Sushio Rant's group of 4 could be seen appearing one after the other, blocking the passageway to the portal. Ling Han smiled and said, "To have made all of you wait so long, I am truly sorry." "It doesn't matter. You can compensate us with your life," the small sword emperor said coldly. "Then, I am even more sorry, as I value my life very much and have no intention of using it to compensate anyone." Ling Han gazed at the 4 people coldly. With his own strength, he wasn't afraid of these 4 people. Even if his battle prowess fell short of theirs, his body could continuously heal, making him the person with the last laugh. However, everyone had the ability to fight a stronger opponent. With the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe, they would probably need to get the Flea King from earlier to come over to be equally matched. He immediately made a decision. He was going to rush forward and first get his hands on the true dragon's tooth. As for the 4 people, they could be dealt with later. Die! Sushio Ran immediately wielded absolute saber, while Son of Lightning also took out the mountain and river axe. Held high in his hands, this treasured tool had been awakened, exuding an incomparably overbearing aura. Ling Han pulled Hellion Sun Shui and Hu Nyo back into the Black Tower. Anyway, the other 4 people already knew that he had a spatial divine tool, so it didn't matter if he used it in front of them. "You want to barge through us? You are too naive." The small sword emperor sneered, and also wielded a treasured sword. With the circulation of the sword's intent, this treasured tool was awakened, exuding a fierce breath. Even if it did not reach the shattering void tier, it wouldn't be far off. Dong Linger also wielded a sword. She hadn't mastered Sword Heart yet, but she also possessed her own formidable power. The power within her blood was unleashed, and at her back, 2 long wings spread out, together with a phoenix tail woven with light and shadow. It was like she had become a colorful phoenix. The 4 young rulers joined forces to stop Ling Han. In addition to the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe, it could be said that they made a well-fortified barricade. Even for shattering void tier, there wasn't more than a few capable of charging through their ranks. Ling Han drew out the Revere life sword and smiled. "Then I will show you." Chapter 807, Trap. Chapter 807, Trap. Without hesitation, Ling Han shot out, directly heading for the passage that led to the 4th floor. As long as he entered, Sushio Ran and the others would naturally be unable to follow. The Revere life sword, due to the proximity of the aura of the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe, automatically awakened. Its patterns glowed, and its killing intent blazed into the skies. Ling Han did not summon the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. His intention now was to barge his way in and not defeat these 4 people. The difficulty level was completely different. How could it be that the Revere life sword would be unable to sustain a single combined strike of the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe? You had to be kidding. Get back. The 4 young elites combined their attacks, and even used such powerful killing tools like the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe. Even shattering void tier elites were practically unable to outshine them. Yet Ling Han forced his way through. The Revere life sword exuded endless light from its patterns, wrapping him tightly within as he charged towards that doorway. Hong, Hong, Hong. In the fierce exchange, Ling Han could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood, yet forced his way through the combined barricade of the 4 young rulers and threw himself into that doorway. The moment he entered, he immediately drew out the Flower of Dead Souls. Wong, This amazing flower that came from the netherworld instantly shone with a dark light that suppressed the blazing flames surrounding him. These flames had absolutely no effect on the physical body. Instead, they directly affected the soul, attempting to burn his soul to ashes. And the flower of dead souls just so happened to be capable of suppressing them. As for why it could do so, Ling Han could not fathom it either. He merely knew that the effects were indeed excellent. He turned around, yet saw that the expressions on the faces of Su Xiaoran and the others looked very odd. They did not look at all defeated that he had managed to barge in, but were rather wearing cold smirks, like they were saying, "You're a stupid idiot. Ling Han, we already know that you have a spatial divine tool, yet still deliberately revealed the use of the flower of dead souls. Could it be that you take us for idiots?" Su Xiaoran sneered. Dong Linger continued, "You're wrong. We deliberately said those words for you to hear. The flower of dead souls is the key to enter into the fourth floor, true, but it's merely one of them. The other key is one has to form the heart of martial arts. Otherwise, you would still be burnt to ashes. After you're dead, we will enter and take away the flower of dead souls. Anyways, in your current condition, you would not be able to go far." The small sword emperor said calmly. Ling Han gave an "oh" and smiled. "You all deliberately say it now because you want to detain me here as much as possible. On the other side, you have sealed the exit so that I would only be able to remain here, and you can easily retrieve the flower of dead souls later. Now that I think about it, you all did not try your best to stop me previously." "That's right. Using this natural killing zone to eliminate you, wouldn't it be much simpler?" The Son of Lightning said calmly. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Since you all know that I have a spatial divine tool, could it be that you don't know that I merely have to duck inside, and it will not matter how horrible the conditions outside are? What could they do to me?" "Emph, you think that just because we have never seen a spatial divine tool before, we don't know the use of a spatial divine tool?" Dong Linger snorted derisively. "Spatial divine tools are merely convenient, but could not completely seal off the environment. Even if you hide inside, you would not be spared from death." Ling Han grinned and said, "Then even if I died, I would not allow the flower of dead souls or the spatial divine tool to benefit you. You all did not find it previously. That is the case now, and in the future, you would not be able to do it either." Hearing these words, Su Xiaoran and the others frowned. This was indeed their worry. They had only heard of the existence of spatial divine tools, but had never seen one before, so how would they know how to retrieve it? Su Xiaoran pondered, then said, "Hand over the flower of dead souls and the spatial divine tool, and we can spare you." When he saw Ling Han's uncaring expression, he stretched out his hand and declared, "I can swear." "We can swear too," the others said as well. In comparison with the valuable True Dragon's Tooth and Spatial Divine Tool, Ling Han's life could naturally be set aside for the moment. Anyways, he had not yet become too powerful. There were many elites in the 5 great sects that could easily kill him. Ling Han laughed heartily and said, "Do you all not know that I am a person who is unafraid of death? I will not stay around to chat anymore, bye." He turned around and left. This was something that Su Xiaoran and the others had not expected. In their opinion, Ling Han was definitely a smart person, and how could it be possible that a smart person would make this kind of choice? This was a situation in which neither side won, and the most they would suffer was mild damage. They had merely lost a flower of dead souls, but in Ling Han's case, he would lose his life. No matter how they thought about it, Ling Han did not seem to be the person who is unafraid of death that he had flaunted himself as. Could it be he has formed Sword Heart? Su Xiaoran's expression changed drastically. He had fought with Ling Han the most, and could be considered more familiar with Ling Han's personality than the others. The expressions of the others changed as well. This was not impossible. Previously, Ling Han had already touched the border of the Sword Heart, which allowed him to be unaffected by Su Xiaoran and the Small Sword Emperor, and kill Ming successfully. Any other person would not be able to do so in such a short amount of time. But how could Ling Han be any other person? Then this would be a little terrible. Sword Heart, added with the Flower of Dead Souls, would be enough to resist the soul-burning flames of the fourth floor, and it would definitely not be difficult for him to obtain the true Dragon's Tooth. And it would be of no use for them to stand guard here either. The moment the time limit was reached, Ling Han would naturally be directly sent out of the ghostly dragon cave. We'll stand guard here. If the time comes and we are still unable to capture Ling Han, we will immediately return to the middle state and ask the ultimate elites to move. We must definitely kill this man. That's right. With the true Dragon's Tooth and a spatial divine tool in his possession, there is definitely a need to get the ultimate elites to move. The four of them all sat at the entrance and waited patiently. In their eyes, there was only one valuable thing in this ghostly dragon cave, and that was the true Dragon's Tooth. Thus, they could not bother to waste time to search for other treasures. Ling Han's hand gripped the Flower of Dead Souls. As he walked in this sea of flames, his steps were steady, and he was extremely calm. Setting aside their ability to burn the soul, the damage that these flames inflicted on the physical body was practically zero. Furthermore, with the protection of the Flower of Dead Souls and the support of the Sword Heart, he had nothing to fear here. He took great strides forwards. The structure of this fourth floor was very simple. It was merely a large passage all the way to the end. Thus, he had no other choice but to walk forwards. Apparently, the true Dragon's Tooth lay at the end of this passage. However, no one was capable of obtaining it, and they could only look upon it from afar. The passage was very long. After a half-day's time, Ling Han finally saw the end. An altar made of stone appeared ahead of him. It was huge, but there was a ring of purple light that had solidified around and encircled the altar. Until now, no one had been able to pass through this ring of light. Otherwise, if anyone had been able to pass through and come back out, how could it be that they had not been able to retrieve the true Dragon's Tooth? In the middle of the altar, there lay a colossal Fong. It was 30 meters long and was completely brilliant white, seeming like a beautiful work of art. Merely the sight of it gave a kind of pleasant feeling. Moreover, even though he was standing so far away from it, Ling Han could still sense the boundless might emitted by the Fong. The True Dragon's Tooth. Chapter 808, True Dragon's Tooth. Chapter 808, True Dragon's Tooth. The True Dragon's Tooth was almost within reach. Ling Han walked forwards. He had already come all this way, so no matter what, he wanted to make an attempt. Even if, at the end, he had to use the Revere Life Sword to slash at it brutally, or even ask Small Tower to move, he wanted to give it a try. The divine item was left behind by a true dragon one. Even in the immortal realm, this was something that would be fought over, wasn't it? Wang. When Ling Han walked in front of that purple halo of light, the halo rippled as if it was water and wrapped around him. He looked down and saw that the Flower of Dead Souls in his grip was exuding a faint light that seemed to form some kind of echo with this purple halo. Realization dawned on him. If this wasn't the case, then so many people managed to come here before, though they all died eventually. Why was there a need to have the Flower of Dead Souls to be capable of obtaining the true Dragon's Tooth? Because it was not difficult to reach this place. The difficulty lay in how to pass through this purple halo, and the Flower of Dead Souls played the role of a key. How strange. Ling Han frowned, and a feeling of confusion rose in his heart. He did not take it to heart, though. He had already entered the altar, and the next thing he had to do was to merely draw the true Dragon's Tooth into the Black Tower. Then, not even immortals would be able to snatch it away from him if they descended into the lower realm. Wang. He walked on the altar. Multiple stone bricks glowed, forming some kind of strange pattern that flowed together unendingly as if some kind of mysterious melody was being played, yet it was a soundless performance. He stopped, and a powerful feeling of alert rose in his heart. If there was any danger that he could not cope with, he would enter the Black Tower at the first moment, and definitely not try to be brave. After all, the strongest dragon in the world was buried under this place. He stopped, but the stone bricks were still glowing, fluctuating in brightness, forming some kind of rhythm. A faint aura was circulating, ancient and aged yet powerful, as if it had experienced uncountable millennia. This was left behind by that old dragon? Ling Han observed for a moment, and when he discovered that only the stone bricks were glowing in intervals and no other change was happening, he once again walked forwards. The true dragon's tooth was right in front of him, and there was absolutely no reason for him to give up. Finally, he arrived in front of the true dragon's tooth. He slowly stretched out his hand and pressed down on the true dragon's tooth. Next, he merely had to wrap his divine sense around this dragon fang, and would then be able to take it into the Black Tower. Wang, the flower of dead souls in his hand, shone brilliantly, yet was also rapidly wilting. One after another, the wilted petals dropped as if its essence had been sucked out, causing it to become dark and lifeless. It no longer had the slightest bit of magic to it anymore. Right at this moment, the true dragon's tooth also exuded blazing light, which was incomparably blinding. Even Ling Han could not stare at it directly, and he hurriedly turned his head and closed his eyes. But there was no slowing down to his movement to draw the true dragon's tooth into the Black Tower. His divine sense had already wrapped fully around the dragon fang. Draw inside. Ling Han's expression changed in spite of himself, realized there was actually no way for him to draw the true dragon's tooth into the Black Tower. How was that possible? There was only one thing that the Black Tower could not take in, and that was an individual possessing sentience. Only if this being did not resist his will would the Black Tower be capable of taking it in. But now this was obviously a dragon fang, so why couldn't he take it in the Black Tower? The dragon fang had its own individual will? Or, in other words, the dragon fang was a divine item, and by nature, could not be taken inside the Black Tower. Ling Han did not understand, but now, he could not open his eyes at all, so there was naturally no way for him to examine what strange thing was happening to this dragon fang. It had not changed in who knew how many millennia, so why had it experienced some kind of unfathomable change the moment he came? The flower of dead souls. Instantly, realization dawned on him. Previously, though many people had come here, none of them had brought the flower of dead souls with them. Only he was the exception, which then triggered some mysterious change in the true dragon's tooth. But what exactly was this change? After at least 15 minutes, the light given off by the true dragon's tooth finally dimmed. Ling Han opened his eyes and saw that the flower of dead souls in his hand had completely wilted, leaving behind only a bare stem. He turned to look at the true dragon's tooth. This colossal fang that was as white as jade was becoming increasingly translucent and had even become transparent. Although there were tightly woven patterns covering it, it did not prevent him from being able to see inside the true dragon's tooth, where there seemed to be a ball of something. He could not distinguish what exactly it was, though. The patterns were very effective at protection, but he could vaguely see that the ball was moving. This was extremely astonishing. True Dragon's Tooth had been abandoned for who knew how many millennia, but there was actually some kind of life form nurtured inside. It had to be a life form, one that possessed its own will. That was why it could resist being taken in by the Black Tower. The feeling of unease in Ling Han's heart grew increasingly stronger. He kept feeling as if he had fallen into some kind of trap, but it had already gone so far, so he still activated the Eye of Truth, intending to have a clear look. Shock. Ling Han was startled. With the Eye of Truth, he finally had a clear view. That ball of something being nurtured inside the dragon fang was actually a little boy. He looked to be about 6 or 7 years old, and was younger than even Hu Niu. He looked quite handsome and was completely naked, but Ling Han could find no traits on him that declared him a descendant of the dragon race. This dragon tooth was really absurd. In the long passage of time, it actually developed its own will and attained new life. That's not right. Just recall Corpse Boss and Corpse 2. Even though they were revived corpses, they had at least developed from a whole corpse. A dragon tooth could actually nurture out a new life. Wasn't that a little bit too far? Ka. Just as his imagination ran wildly, one crack after another appeared on the dragon tooth. It was as if a spider's web had enveloped the whole fang, and then, with a pong, the whole dragon tooth shattered. Then, a little boy stood on the ground. Ha, I have finally come back to life. This little boy said in a voice filled with childish innocence, yet his tone was old and mature. He cast a look on Ling Han and could not help but haughtily exclaim, "Junior, why are you not kneeling down now that you've seen your ancestor?" Ling Han was stunned at first. Where had this monster come from? But then he immediately discovered that this little boy was merely in the body-refining tier. So what wariness would he still have? He directly stretched out his hand to grab him. "Insolence! To actually dare treat me so rudely! Just see how I shall deal with you," the little boy said angrily. Wong, a terrifying dragon's might exuded from him. It was extremely noble and majestic, and even Xin Yu Tong and Wenren Jie would not be able to stop themselves from kneeling down immediately in face of such pressure. This had nothing to do with cultivation level, but was pure domination of bloodline. But what effect would this dragon's intimidation have on Ling Han? He was not a member of the dragon race, and had already formed Sword Heart. Additionally, he also had the Black Tower inside supporting him, so the thing he feared least was this kind of mental pressure. His hand grabbed out, and the little boy had already fallen into his grasp. Ling Han laughed, raised his large hand, and began spanking the little boy's behind. Pa, pa, pa. It immediately caused the little boy to erupt into loud wails, his little face completely red. This was too humiliating. How high was his status? Yet he had actually had his behind spanked by a junior. Moreover, it was his bare backside, which made him want to spit out blood in infuriated shame. "Junior, stop immediately. Do you know who I am?" The little boy screamed loudly as he continued to struggle endlessly. Ling Han's hand did not stop falling as he continued to spank the little boy's behind like mad, and said calmly, "If I had not guessed wrongly, you must be that alternative dragon." Chapter 809, Reappearance of the Alternative Dragon. Chapter 809, Reappearance of the Alternative Dragon. The little boy was startled in spite of himself and asked, "Why would you make such a guess?" "Fuck, if you weren't that alternative dragon, why would you be able to absorb the essence of the true dragon's tooth? Furthermore, you're acting so mature and old that merely the sight of you would make one think in that direction," Ling Han said with exasperation, but did not continue the spanking either. He casually tossed the little boy over to one side, then threw a piece of clothing over. The little boy slipped it on, but this was Ling Han's clothing, and for him, it was really a little too big, so long that even his hands could no longer be seen, the sleeves dragging onto the floor. He could not help but feel depressed and asked, "Is there nothing smaller?" "Yes, but they're all for girls. Do you want them?" Ling Han asked. The little boy hesitated for a moment, then, with a shake of his head, said, "I'll just wear this one then." He rolled up the sleeves and trouser legs, but the clothes were too large, so he still looked a bit out of place, causing Ling Han to laugh in spite of himself. "Since you already know who I am, and yet you still dare to laugh at me, are you tired of living?" the little boy threatened fiercely. "Pa!" Ling Han delivered a knock to his head, instantly causing the little boy to grab his head in pain. "What is it? Have I not beaten you into submission just now?" The little boy was confused and asked, "Why are you not affected by my dragon's might? Although I have lost all my cultivation, my dragon's might is still the strongest in the world. Any descendant of the dragon race would be affected by me." Ling Han clicked his tongue and said, "Open your damn eyes and look carefully. What part of me looks like the descendant of the dragon race?" "What? You actually are not a descendant of the dragon race?" The little boy's face was filled with disbelief. "But I obviously sensed the aura of dragon race from you." This was normal. His wife was a member of the dragon race, and his son also had the bloodline of the dragon race. Furthermore, he was also cultivating the 9 dragons tyrant body art. So what was odd about him having a little dragon smell one? Ling Han picked up the little boy in a single move and said, "I actually forgot to ask you. What are you called again?" The little boy worked hard at presenting a serious expression, crossing his arms over his chest, pretending to be reserved. However, Ling Han was holding onto the collar of his shirt, and his body was endlessly wriggling around, which instantly caused this air of utmost seriousness that he was trying to put on to completely vanish. He flew into a rage from the humiliation and said, Even if you are not a descendant of the dragon race, I am your senior by who knows how many years. You need to maintain appropriate respect towards me. Besides, this realm still needs me to come out and save it. A thought streaked through Ling Han's head. In the past, the alternative dragon was incomparably powerful, and even the immortals that descended could not kill him. So he definitely had to know the truth of the reckoning. Now, after passing through endless years and being reborn, he would definitely not be satisfied to die here of old age, completely helpless. The so-called saving, could it also be indicating the splitting open of the skies? He did not ask directly. Instead, he said, "Don't think that I don't know. This damn place can only be entered with the flower of dead souls. It must be your trick, and has a definite relation with your rebirth. You have to know, I was the one who brought the flower of dead souls, so I am your benefactor. You still put on the airs of a senior with me? Is it that your backside is itching for another spanking again?" Although the flower of dead souls had been brought by Sushio Rance Group, did Ling Han need to explain it so clearly to the alternative dragon? The little boy's aura could not help but weaken. Ling Han was right. The key to his rebirth was the flower of dead souls. This was something that could not be missed, and from this aspect, Ling Han was indeed his savior. He humphed and retorted, "Fine, I shall tell you my true name. My surname is Helion, with the name of Tianyun, and I am the strongest dragon of this realm." He was very proud of himself, which caused Ling Han to look down on him in spite of himself. From the looks of it, after he had gotten a new life, this alternative dragon's personality had also undergone a great change. Otherwise, what need was there for an ultimate elite with 20 stars of shattering void tier to be so tsundere? This kind of existence had absolutely no need to seek the approval of others, and would be able to match even the immortals that descended into the lower realm, being powerful to an indescribable level. However, the surname of Helion? Could he be the old ancestor of Helion Rome? Fuck, then he definitely could not let him find out that his wife was Helion Sun Shui. Otherwise, this guy would definitely act tsundere to the death and put on the airs of an elder in front of him. Ling Han stretched out his hand, a clear threat, before he asked, "You have obviously died for who knows how many millennia, so how have you come back to life?" "Himph, with the powerful existence that I am, what is so strange about me being able to live a second life?" Helion Tianyun humphed. Ling Han was naturally not going to believe him. Even in the immortal realm, it was immeasurably difficult to reincarnate a soul, so it was obviously even more difficult here in the lower realm. However, this was their first encounter, so even if he had saved his life, how was it possible that Helion Tianyun would easily reveal his secrets? If you wanted to know the secret of another, you'd have to reveal your own secret. Only then would you be able to win the trust of others. Ling Han asked, "You mentioned saving this world. Were you referring to splitting open the skies?" Hong. Even if this was the ghostly dragon cave, which could claim to be an independent plane, the moment Ling Han said the words, "splitting open the skies," thunder still rang out around them. Helion Tianyun could not help but be stunned, and exclaimed, "You monster! You are actually not tolerated by the heavens. No, no, no. You have the potential to threaten this world. That is why you were sensed by the world, which wanted to draw out a tribulation of thunder to eliminate you." Ling Han's face darkened in spite of himself. To have an old monster from who knew how many millennia ago point at his face and call him a monster, no matter what, still made him feel awkward. How long have I actually slept that there would actually appear such a strange person in the world? Helion Tianyun grabbed his head and exclaimed, "Wah! And I still wanted to rescue all the life in this world and become the Messiah, but I never thought that my business would be snatched from me. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Why didn't I wake up earlier?" "Restrain your grief," Ling Han said from the side. "No one died in my family, so what grief would I feel?" Helion Tianyun said with irritation. Ling Han was momentarily speechless. Looks like this alternative dragon should have been a joker in the past as well. As the saying went, it was easier to change mountains and rivers than to alter one's character. Even if he had been changed from the experience of obtaining a second life, it was not possible that he would have changed so much. Only if he were a natural joker would he be like this. However, you mentioned splitting open the skies, so you should already know the truth of the reckoning of the immortal realm, Helian Tianyun said, quickly regaining his composure. Ling Han nodded and asked, in the past, you did not shatter the void and become an immortal. Was it because you discovered the sky-sealing great formation? That's right. Initially, I thought that after I cultivated to the highest degree, it should not be a problem to shatter the void. Unexpectedly, I was still not a match. Helian Tianyun sighed. Thankfully, I had an alternative plan. Though I suffered serious injuries at that time, I still managed to escape back here and died seated here. However, I nurtured a sliver of my divine sense inside the dragon fang to seek life from my death. When I was young, I obtained a divine herb that would allow the soul to undergo a metamorphosis. Thus, I simply hardened my heart, abandoned my original body, and reformed my body with the true dragon's tooth. Hee, I have cultivated this fang to the level of a true dragon's, and even in the immortal realm, it would be an awesome treasure. Now, after uncountable years, condensing the essence of the dragon fang into my body, and taking the final step with the help of the flower of dead souls, I have finally come back to life again. At that time, though my body was already very powerful, I was still not strong enough to bear the thoughts of all life of this world, but this time, I will definitely be able to. Chapter 8:10, Taking a Disciple. Chapter 8:10, Taking a Disciple. In his last life, Helian Tianyun had wanted to split open the skies, but splitting open the skies would require the establishment of a nation. After all, the power of an individual was limited, while this realm did not meet the conditions for letting someone become immortal. Without the support of power of the nation, no one's power would be strong to the level of being able to split open the skies. Even immortals could not do so. Releasing extreme amounts of power would only cause them to be repelled by the world. But it was a different case with the support of power of the nation, because the original cultivation level had not exceeded the world's limit. The world also had rules that it needed to follow. Otherwise, splitting open the skies would only be empty words. But using the power of the nation as support by itself put a massive burden on an individual, so how could it be done without a physique strong enough? Even with the sturdiness and strength of physique of a member of the dragon race, and the power of the alternative dragon at that time, he still had not chosen to split open the skies. That was because he knew that it was not possible for him to bear the power of the nation formed by the combined thoughts of all life in this realm. In this life, Helian Tianyun used the true dragon's tooth to reform his body. Then, when he once again cultivated back to the shattering void tier, his physique would naturally be even stronger. Perhaps, he would then really be capable of withstanding the combined thoughts of all life on this realm. However, now that there is a monster like you, I can be more relaxed, and there is no need for me to take the responsibility of splitting open the skies onto my shoulders. Helian Tianyun laughed. Even the world moved because of you, which clearly indicated that the chance of you succeeding is incomparably high. Ling Han pondered, then replied, You are really lucky that you managed to wait until the arrival of the Flower of Dead Souls. This thing is an item of the Netherworld. Perhaps, in a whole lifetime, it would never come to you. I don't believe that this true dragon's tooth can allow your soul to be preserved eternally. Hee, that's why I said I am a very fortunate person. It was destined that I would be able to come back to life, Helian Tianyun said, smiling. Then you plan to help me? Ling Han questioned. Naturally. Even if I live another life, I still do not have the confidence of breaking through that sky-sealing great formation, so I can only place my hopes on splitting open the skies, Helian Tianyun said. When he spoke of the sky-sealing great formation, he could not help but shiver. At the time, it caused him to suffer tremendous injury, and he had almost died, so he naturally still had lingering fear. Ling Han laughed and retorted, You are only in the body refining tier presently, so what can you help me with? Pay, my current body is nurtured from the true dragon's tooth, and added with the fact that I had reached the human apex in my last life, I will be walking on an old path in this life, so there will not be the slightest bottleneck. You merely need to give me a few years' time, as well as enough resources for cultivation. How difficult would it be for me to return to the peak? Moreover, my dragon's might is only stronger than it was before. Whatever dragon, in front of me, can only bow down obediently in submission, Helian Tianyun declared proudly. This effect was indeed quite useful. If Helian Tianyun could conquer the seas, with him and Ma Duobao on land, then both sides would need only combine their respective territories when the time came. So wouldn't the whole realm be settled? Not bad, not bad. Although he had been scammed by the alternative dragon once, he did still get something out of it. Ling Han turned to look and said, "However, the flower of dead souls has been absorbed by you. So how should we leave?" "Stupid. This place has been formed from my body and is used to protect my soul. I used the true dragon's tooth to attract others to bring the flower of dead souls here. Now that I was reborn, there is naturally no need for this place to exist anymore," Helian Tianyun replied disdainfully. True, though his current abilities were so weak that a single finger would be able to push him over, it did not change the fact that he had once been an alternative dragon. Ling Han hesitated, then said, "I'll introduce you to a few people." "Yeah." Helian Tianyun appeared very astonished. There was not even a soul around here. So how are you going to introduce me to a few people? But he had barely finished the town when he saw a few extra people appear suddenly around him. This gave him a scare. Then, he said in absolute shock, "Spatial divine tool. An actual spatial divine tool. This brat is indeed loved by the fate, actually being able to get his hands on a spatial god tool." His eyes swept over, and he could not hold back a yee as he said, "These are descendants of the dragon race. I can smell it on them," he said, pointing at Helian Sun Shui and Ling Jian Shui. Meanwhile, Helian Sun Shui stared at Ling Han questioningly and asked, "Who is this kid?" "Your ancestor," Helian Tianyun said in a very aged manner. Helian Sun Shui was naturally not going to believe him. This tiny kid actually dared to take advantage of her? She immediately aimed her hand to knock his head. However, her hand had just stretched out Windwing. A supreme dragon's might exuded from him, causing her delicate body to instantly weaken. Her legs could not even support her body properly anymore, and she collapsed backwards. Ling Han stretched out his arms and caught her in his embrace. Ling Jian Shui, meanwhile, was furious. Although the little guy was only half a year old, his intelligence could not be measured with normal standards. He immediately jumped out of Helian Sun Shui's arms, crouched on the ground, and directly howled at Helian Tianyun. Helian Tianyun was stunned. This little babe has a very dense true dragon bloodline to actually be capable of matching my dragon's might. Aya! He emitted a terrible scream. That was because Ling Jian Shui had already shot over and gave him a direct punch to the fact, causing him to fall onto the ground. Although he had once been an alternative dragon, and his dragon's might was indeed terrifying, in terms of ability, he was only in the body-refining tier. And what about Ling Jian Shui? His brute strength had already reached the level of the gushing spring tier, so naturally, the battle prowess of both parties was on completely different levels. The little guy gave him a harsh beating, and Helian Tianyun could only wail in pain. Who asked him to bully the former's mom? Yet Helian Tianyun was only delighted as he said, "This little guy is not bad. I want to take him as my disciple and teach him the unsurpassed ultimate secrets of the dragon race." A weird expression appeared on Ling Han's face, and he asked, "Are you sure you want to take my son as your disciple?" "Your son?" Helian Tianyun was astonished and said, "No wonder his bloodline is so pure, and he can even actually resist my dragon's might. Haha, I am definitely going to take in this brat as my disciple. Whoever dares fight me over him, I will become hostile." Completely losing his image, he was stepped on by Ling Jian Shui, still crying out loudly. Ling Han mumbled something in a low voice to Helian Sun Shui, causing Helian Sun Shui's beautiful eyes to widen. This was really her ancestor. But if Helian Tianyun wanted to take Ling Jian Shui as his disciple, then wouldn't he be on the same level as herself and Ling Han? What a mess that would be by then. Ling Han nodded and acquiesced. "All right. For the sake of your seniority, I will allow my son to become your disciple." He went over and picked Ling Jianshui up, then said, "Now that you've taken in your disciple, what about the first meeting gift? In any case, you're an alternative dragon, so if you're not generous enough, others would really look down on you." Helian Tianyun laughed drily. His body had transformed into the ghostly dragon cave. Furthermore, so many years had passed, and he was really going around bare too, so what worthy treasure could he produce? He hurriedly said, "I will teach all that I know to this brat, and this is more valuable than anything else." "Forget it, I knew you were poor." Ling Han casually tossed out a few spirit herbs and said, "Here, take them and refine them. Quickly increase your abilities. Don't let it be that you would not be able to match your own disciple in power." Helian Tianyun chortled, and was not the slightest bit embarrassed. He grabbed the spirit herbs and began chewing. In a short moment, the entire aura of his body spiked wildly, and he had actually broken through to the element-gathering tier. Indeed, he did not have any kind of bottleneck in his cultivation, and did not need any kind of accumulation of power. Breaking through was as simple as drinking water to him. Chapter 811, Dragon Might Finally Performs. Chapter 811, Dragon Might Finally Performs. Ling Han simply set out a feast, using all kinds of precious meat and ingredients. These included the top-grade demonic beast meat, the Mariety's treasured pearl, and dragon blood tyrant ginseng, all of which were put together in a pot and cooked. Although he was completely lacking in culinary skills, it didn't change the fact that these were excessively precious top-grade ingredients. Just by putting them together to be cooked, a tasty fragrance had already assailed their nostrils and made their fingers twitch. Helian Tianyun was also pathetically salivating, saying, "Oh, the Mariety's treasured pearl. Even I did not manage to obtain it those years ago. And also dragon blood tyrant ginseng. Even I have only ever eaten one. These are all Nyo's. You're not allowed to snatch them." Hunyo warned viciously. Helian Tianyun saw Hunyo, and his eyes shone involuntarily. He said, "Little girl, have you been betrothed to anyone? What do you think of me? I should be a good match for you." Pong, pong, pong. The consequence of having such a cheap mouth was naturally to be beaten up by Hunyo, whose assault against him wasn't light at all. Helian Tianyun had to beg Hunyo to stop, which made him feel extremely gloomy. In his previous life, his existence was unparalleled. How was it now that he had already been beaten up by 3 people after just having been reborn? How was it that his dragon's might could not be used again? "Damn brat, could this little girl be your daughter as well?" he screamed. Otherwise, how could she not be affected by his dragon's might? This could not only work for the dragon race, but also have a powerful suppression on other races, only that it wouldn't be as effective. "Nyo belongs to Ling Han," Hunyo said savagely as she stomped her little feet onto Helian Tianyun, causing him so much pain that he wished for death. Helian Tianyun felt depressed. How come all the good things were taken by Ling Han? His disciple, an unmatched genius, was the son of Ling Han. Now, this strange little beauty was also Ling Han's little wife. Once the cooking was done, everyone was grabbing at the food. Facing these kinds of ingredients, even heaven-tier cultivators wouldn't dare to eat too much. At most, they would just drink a few spoonfuls of the soup, or else their body would explode. However, Ling Han, Hunyo, Helian Sunshui, and Helian Tianyun all had a humongous appetite, and each one of them ate to their heart's content. However, Helian Sunshui was the first to reach satisfaction. It wasn't that her stomach couldn't eat more. Rather, she was unable to take in any more nutritious essence and had to sit on the side to refine it. Ling Han, Hunyo, and Helian Tianyun were still eating wildly, having no intention to stop. Helian Tianyun felt even more depressed, saying, "I was nurtured by the true dragon's tooth. My body is tough and won't explode even with the consumption of more energy. But what is it with the two of you that you can actually eat more than I?" He felt that he was reaching his limit. After all, his cultivation was too low now. Useless. Hunyo rolled her eyes at him, indicating that he was too inferior. Helian Tianyun could only remain silent. After eating a few more mouthfuls of meat, he could only sit at one side and start refining. He was truly a monster. In an instant, he had broken through a few layers and entered the gushing spring tier. Finally, he could compete against Ling Jianshui on the same level. However, as he advanced, raising his level wouldn't be as simple. After all, the higher the cultivation, the more terrifying the amount of energy needed would be. Especially in the case of breaking through from the heaven tier to shattering void tier, the amount of energy required was staggering. Yet for him, it was only a matter to be accomplished within 1 or 2 years, or 2 to 3 years at most. As for Ling Han and Hu Niu, there was scarcely any obvious progress after the meal. After all, their battle prowess had reached the level of the heaven tier. Thus, it would naturally be more challenging if they wanted to further raise their levels. Let's go. It's time to leave here. Ling Han snapped his fingers. After packing up the pots, bowls, and chopsticks at once, they walked back in the direction they came from. Su Xiaoran and the others should still be at the entrance, Ling Han said. There is no advantage of terrain for us this time, so we need to fight all out. Pa, leave it to me. Helian Tianyun jumped out. He certainly didn't believe that the world was full of abnormal people like Ling Han and Hu Niu, who similarly wasn't affected by his dragon's might. Ling Han let out a mischievous laugh and said, "You had better not die so soon after having just been reborn. At least leave a few mystical powers for my son." "You jinx!" Helian Tianyun screamed angrily. Unfortunately, he no longer had the godly valor as he had in the past. Otherwise, he would certainly put this human being in his place for daring to look down on him, the great Lord Alternative Dragon. They came to the entrance, and sure enough, Su Xiaoran and his group had already sensed their movement. One by one, they stood in position and blocked the entrance. Helian Tianyun strutted a few steps ahead and snorted. "Juniors, why didn't you kneel immediately after having seen me?" Su Xiaoran's group of 4 people already knew that Ling Han possessed a spatial god tool. Naturally, they did not find the additional little brat all that surprising and completely paid no heed to him. Dong Linger said, "Ling Han, hand over the true dragon's tooth and spatial god tool. You should know that you can never make it out of here alive." Helian Tianyun was furious. They were too despicable was once again disregarded. Also, they wanted the true dragon's tooth? Wasn't he the true dragon tooth? He snorted. Wong, dragon's might was launched, and the mighty attack shot towards the 4 people. Yeah. Su Xiaoran's group of 4 all released muffled groans. Under the suppression of dragon's might, they had all turned pale. Even though they were all rulers of martial arts, they still experienced difficulty in breathing under such dragon's might. Wong, Su Xiaoran immediately recovered using the absolute saber. The absolutely strong saber intent flowed and instantly blocked dragon's might. The Son of Lightning also wasn't slow. As he brandished the mountains and rivers axe, the emission of light from this treasured tool also blocked the dragon's might. Helian Tianyun could not help but let out a bitter cry. His dragon's might was blocked again. How could he endure this? Fortunately, these 2 juniors did not block the dragon's might with their own abilities, but through the use of 2 spirit tools. Otherwise, he would truly weep. He stared at the 2 spirit tools for a while, and muttered to himself, "Those tools are the absolute saber and an imitation of the mountains and rivers axe?" Having recognized them, he felt relieved. The first-generation master of the absolute saber was even an elite of the immortal realm, whereas the mountain and river axe originated from and was forged using this realm's power. Even if it was just an imitation, it was reasonable to have some special power capable of matching his dragon's might. Su Xiaoran and the Son of Lightning could resist the dragon's might, but Small Sword Emperor and Dong Linger couldn't, not even if their hands held the level 10 spirit tools bestowed upon them by their elders. These had absolutely no resistance against dragon's might. After all, this was an alternative dragon, which had once been invincible in this world. Su Xiaoran and the Son of Lightning quickly guarded Dong Linger, and Small Sword Emperor less Ling Han took the chance to kill them. As a result, their effective combat power had dropped to 2 in an instant. Although there were still the absolute saber and mountains and rivers axe, their threat had been greatly reduced. Ling Han laughed loudly. Wielding the Revere Life Sword, he opened up a path ahead as he rushed forward. Although Su Xiu Ran and Son of Lightning went all out to kill him, how could they suppress the Revere Life Sword in such a short while? Ling Han, who was capable of it, was also hardly fighting zealously. He took the others away with him, leaving Su Xiu Ran in a limbo, wondering whether to chase them or not. If they were to give chase, then what about Dong Linger and Small Sword Emperor if Ling Han and his group managed to catch them off guard? If they didn't chase, then it would be certain that the other party would have obtained the true dragon's tooth. Could it be that they could only watch helplessly as Ling Han and his group walked away? But in the end, they still didn't pursue. After a while, Small Sword Emperor and Dong Linger recovered from the aftershock of Dragon's might. Both their faces expressed fear. How could this imposing force be so frightening? The situation has progressed beyond our control. Return immediately to the middle state. Let's request for Ultimate Elite's assistance to kill Ling Han and seize the true dragon's tooth. The little boy was also extremely formidable, actually being able to release such incomparably terrifying dragon's might. We mustn't spare him either. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.